the interview has
Awesome,
begun.
awesome. Well, thank you for being here, my friend. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, it's good to be on. Thanks for inviting
For
me.
sure, for sure. Anytime, anytime. I gotta say, I found your video, the one that about Charlie Kirk
Mm-hmm.
when he got assassinated, and that's actually how I found you.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I saw that video, I thought it was a pretty cool video, and then I started watching more and more of your content. I peep into your streams every now and then,
Mm-hmm.
so that's how I actually found you. And I'm curious, like, is that how like a lot of, did you get like a lot more viewers when you
Yep.
had that video uploaded?
Yeah, I did. I have a lot of new audience members now in my live streams, my videos, and it began with the explosion of the channel. Began with that Charlie Kirk video, and the thing is that I did not expect that to happen at all. I did not. Charlie Kirk was murdered. It was a big shock to me. Did not expect that at all. And I started reading up on what was happening around him. And honestly, I've known about Charlie Kirk for a long, long time. I've known about him since, I want to say 2016 or so. And I've always just seen him as, I always just saw him as just a regular American conservative. Just a sort of a
Yeah.
center-right, just typical Republican family values guy. And I knew that he had a conflict with the far right, but that was pretty much it. I didn't really pay attention to Charlie Kirk that much. I knew about Turning Point USA, and I knew about his connection with Donald Trump, but other than that, I really didn't know much about him. And then I heard that he was murdered. I saw the videos, the really brutal videos on X of his murder, where he was nearly decapitated by a bullet. And then I started reading up on what was happening in his own life. I started reading up on what was happening around him and how he was beginning to turn on the pro-Israel narrative. And what's interesting is, for a long time now, I've known that the pro-Israel narrative has been declining. I've known this for a while. I started noticing this pattern since 2018. I began to notice this. And I know that without the United States, Israel is extremely vulnerable. Israel needs America for protection. But that American-Israeli alliance depends tremendously on the pro-Israel population in the United States. And without that pro-Israel population, America's support for Israel is at least greatly diminished. It's horrendously deflated, we can say at least. And for decades, at least going all the way back to the 1960s, Americans have overwhelmingly been supporters of Israel on both sides of the political spectrum. So Democrat, Republican, being pro-Israel was the custom. That began to decline from my recollection, I would say at around 2017, 2018. And it's been declining. It was declining from that point. And then in 2023, after October the 7th, this massive wave, this massive surge in anti-Israel sentiment just erupted like a volcano in this country and in the rest of the Western world, I would say. And a lot of people didn't expect it, but it didn't really surprise me because this was something that I had been talking about for years before that. And I remember the day before Kirk's murder, this actually happened. I know this is going to sound like I'm making it up, but this actually happened. Speak of the devil sort of moment. But I was talking to my mom, and I said, for the first time since really the establishment of the modern day state of Israel, the majority of Americans are critical of Israel. And if Israel loses the American people, Israel loses America, ultimately speaking. And Israel is desperate. And I told my mom, I said, they're going to kill people here in the United States. This is what I told my mom. I said, they're going to kill people here in the US. They're going to kill people, and they're going to try to use people's murders as a way to foment pro-Israel sentiment. I know it sounds like I'm making this up, and I've never said this in a video before. This is the first time I've actually said this, but this actually happened. And the next day, Charlie Kirk gets murdered. Speak of the devil. So I started reading up on what was happening with Charlie and how he began to sort of turn against the pro-Israel narrative and how he began to do things that really angered the pro-Israel donors who were backing him, such as inviting Tucker Carlson, inviting Dave Smith to debate Josh Hammer at the TPUSA event, I want to say in July of this year.
I saw that one.
Yeah, and so he was beginning to turn, and he began to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and the Mossad, and so they were beginning to lose him. He was getting closer to Tucker Carlson, and now just recently a video came out to the public in which you see Tucker Carlson talking with Megyn Kelly. They're in this TPUSA event. This was before Tucker Carlson was speaking at his on the stage, and Mr. Kirk approaches Tucker Carlson and says, "I want you to just really, really have at it. I want you to really express what you believe." And Tucker said, "You got it." So he really wanted Tucker Carlson to express himself. And what did Tucker Carlson say in that speech that he gave at TPUSA? He said, American citizens who serve for a foreign military should be stripped of their citizenship. And he said that would include Americans who serve in the Israeli armed forces. When you say something like that, that really pisses off the pro-Israel people. It really pisses off the pro-Israel donors. Now, people could just say, okay, Ted, you're pointing to facts. You're pointing to real events, such as the Tucker Carlson speaking engagement, Dave Smith, Megyn Kelly, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Kirk bringing up the connection between Epstein and Mossad, et cetera. But it's not really, I mean, how could the pro-Israel funders see Kirk bringing in Tucker or bringing up Epstein and Mossad as a really big deal? That doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is. It is a big deal when you consider, for one, how pro-Israel funders operate, how they think. And I know how they operate because I have personal experience with them, and I can give you that story. And also, secondly, when you look at the situation that Israel is in. Israel is in a situation where it is a protectorate. I know Israelis would hate to admit this, but it's true. Even just recently, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz published an article saying that Israel is a protectorate of the United States, and that's what Israel is. Israel is a protectorate of the United States. It needs the United States. And so Israel needs that pro-Israel evangelical support. Israel has lost the left. Israel has lost the Democrats.
When do you think they lost the left?
I think that's been going on for a while.
Mhm.
And the Democrats, as far back as I can remember, have always tended to be more critical of Israel. It was, so when it came to people being critical of Israel, this has always been a Democrat sort of liberal left-wing type of situation. So you can go back to the most adamant critics of Israel, Norman Finkelstein, and a whole bunch of others. They, Cornel West, they usually are in the left-wing faction. There have been people on the right who have been critical of Israel, like Pat Buchanan, but those were an anomaly. Those were very rare. Criticism of Israel has almost always come from the left until now. Now it's different. And so what's happening now is you have this overlap between the right and the left, where right-wingers and left-wingers who disagree on almost everything can come together on this one issue. And right now, the only thing that is uniting the left and the right is Israel. That is the only thing that's uniting them. That's why you see Tucker Carlson hanging out with Cenk Uygur. And what are they agreeing on? Cenk's a liberal who's pro-gay marriage and he's pro-abortion and he's for socialist, or what would be considered socialist ideas. Tucker Carlson is more of a conservative Christian family values guy, but they're both agreeing on Israel. And this is what terrifies Israel more than anything. That's what terrifies them.
I think there's a possibility they might try to infiltrate like the Democratic Party and then kind of do like the reverse card, maybe.
100%. And I was thinking about this a few days ago. I thought, because now if you try to find Democrats who are pro-Israel, you're literally looking at a single digit number. It's that low. It's, last I checked, it was like, I think it was like 70 something or so percent, or somewhere around that number, percent of Democrats are totally against what Israel has been doing in Gaza. And the amount, it's not single digits, but it's on the low double digit ends, I think. Or maybe it is single digits. I'll have to look back at that. But it's very, very low in the Democrats for support for Israel. And now when you look at the Republican faction of the United States, it is much lower, like overwhelmingly lower than what we were accustomed to. So now if you include all Republicans, it's still of all adult age groups, all voting age groups, it's still the majority of Republicans are supporting Israel. But once you get into that under 50s range, 50 and below range, the majority, or at least half of those Republicans, are critical of Israel. And this is from data that we got in March of this year. So it's probably a lot higher now. But when you include all adult Americans, we're looking at over 50% of Americans being critical of Israel. And it's only going to increase. It's not going to go down. It's only going to increase from here.
The youth is more like anti like funding, giving money to Israel. It seems like too, right?
100%. And right now you see the conservative movement in America is going through this. It's going through this massive change. And you could almost call it a purging, where it is purging out the pro-Israel elements. Ben Shapiro's on his way out. Josh Hammer is on his way out. Mark Levine is on his way out. All these people are on their way out. And in fact, if you look at the Daily Wire has Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh, I think, is the most popular figure in that whole network now. But what makes Matt Walsh popular? What's one of the things, at least, that makes him popular is it's that he's critical of Israel. So the Daily Wire is now in this situation where it has to adapt. Everyone is either going to die out or they're going to adapt to this new zeitgeist. That's the bottom line.
It's hard to see that with Shapiro, though. You know, it's like, how's that going to happen?
What, with himself or with his organization, his media empire?
Like, what would Shapiro do? You know, like, what can he do? Like, I know he's trying to do some things. He was quiet for a while, but now he's kind of saying stuff. But it's almost like he has to.
He has to. If you are going to survive, you are going to have to be critical of Israel. It's just the bottom line. You have to. And so now you see Matt Walsh is, from what I understand, the only guy who's sort of keeping the Daily Wire together, because he is critical of Israel. He's talking about America first. And so I think the Iran bombing situation, that 12-day war between Israel and Iran, sparked this purging. I mean, it was going on before, but
it definitely skipped a few steps.
Yeah,
for sure.
The 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran accelerated us to this point where now it's, are you America first or are you MIGA, as Marjorie Taylor Greene says? She says MIGA, make Israel. Yeah, make Israel great again, or are you MAGA?
Right.
Which one is it?
Yeah, it's crazy for sure.
Yeah. So,
and I'm thinking most people don't really have like bad intentions. Like they just don't, like, we have so many problems in America, and it's like we got homelessness, like high prices in housing, like inflation. Like I feel like we just need to focus like on ourselves financially, and like in other aspects too, before we start giving money to other people, especially when it's involving like killing like kids and like other people, and like we don't, and most people don't even know what's going on, but our tax money's going there, you know, and that goes for any country too, you know, like it's not just Israel. It's, you know,
the thing is that what you're saying now is what a lot of people feel. They're not necessarily anti-Semitic. they're
No,
just they're just critical of Israel, and they don't want their
I
money
mean there
going to
are some
Israel.
people like that.
Of
I mean,
course.
there's dumbasses on in every political spectrum, you know, like obviously. But I'm saying like I feel like most people just want what's good, you know, for their country, you know, left or right. I feel like,
The
but
thing,
people have different
yeah.
ways of getting there, you know.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that I think what we are returning to is basically what America was for a period much longer than the post World War II era. So before World War II and during World War II, even, Americans by and large were very isolationist. And they weren't really, I have to be careful how I say this, but they weren't really a fan of the synagogue. I mean, Americans by and large were not pro Israel. I'll just put it that way. They were not pro Israel. There was no Israel, but you know what I mean. They were not pro Israel. They were very isolationist, and that was very, very common. That was pretty much standard in American society. After World War II, there began this change in American society where, because of the Holocaust, because of what happened, people thought, you know what, we don't want this to happen ever again. And people began to change their perspective. People began to change their opinion on this. Israel was formed in 1948, and a lot of people saw that as Bible prophecy being fulfilled. 1967 comes rushing in, and you have this war between Israel and its neighbors, you know, with Jordan, with Egypt, and Israel wins. And people thought, wow, we're seeing Bible prophecy coming alive right before our eyes. And Christian Zionism was a thing before 1967, don't get me wrong, but it really skyrocketed after the 1967 war, or what's known as the 6 Days War. So that commenced this new zeitgeist, this new trend where Americans would be pro-Israel. And that was a thing from the late 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, 2010s. That was the custom on both sides, Republican and Democrat. That was what was expected. Something happened, albeit most people did not notice it. But something happened at a. Are you there? Sorry. Oh, I'm just making sure.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I'm making sure.
Yeah, I'm here.
I thought Discord was off. I thought was it
No,
the
you're good.
little Discord icon there. But something happened. They say there was a great article that was written on this phenomenon, published by The Atlantic, and it's a great article if you haven't read it. It's called "The Golden Era." What was it? It was "The Golden Age of American Jews is Over." If you put that in Google, you'll get it. Great article on the decline of America's pro-Israel trend, pro-Israel culture. Something happened right after 9/11. This is when this trend really begins to be born, begins to spawn, so to speak. And what happened was there was a report about some Israelis who were seen dancing on a parking lot roof while the Twin Towers were burning. And the story's true. There were, there's the infamous meme of the dancing Israelis, but it's true. It's a true story. There were Israelis that were seen dancing. They were arrested. They were investigated. They had ties to the Israeli government. At least some of them did. And they were sent back to Israel. So then people started talking about that. And I remember Alex Jones. Alex Jones has changed a lot. But back in the day, before Alex Jones got really famous, he was talking about the dancing Israelis. So a lot of this sort of thing began in the early 2000s. But still, at that point, the overwhelming majority of Americans were pro-Israel. Fast forward to 2008. What happened in 2008? You had the big economic crisis in the United States. Then you had the 2010 European economic crisis that began in Greece. But in 2008, criticism of Israel began to see a little slight jump, a little slight burst, a little slight increase. Because people began to say things like, well, it's the Jews who are behind this economic problem, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not an economist. I don't know all the ins and outs of how economics works, but this was something that was being said. So there was a little increase there. Something happened in 2017. 2017 is when you saw the phenomenon of alt-right ideology become popular in the United States. So there was something called the alt-right. And the alt-right was sort of this hodgepodge of nationalism with eugenics, with anti-SJW ideas, and there wasn't a whole lot of criticism of Israel per se, but you did have that element in there. It wasn't the biggest element because you had Zionists who were in the alt-right movement, but there still were people in the alt-right who were critical of Israel, and they were kind of rising a little bit. 2018 pops up, and 2018, Trump pulls out of the Iran deal. Well, why did Donald Trump pull out of the Iran deal? Because he had this billionaire funder, this casino mogul named Sheldon Adelson, who was funding him. And Sheldon Adelson told Donald Trump to pull out of the Iran deal. And he pulls out of the Iran deal, which was a terrible, terrible idea, because right after he pulled out of the Iran deal, Iran begins to accelerate its nuclear program. But people noticed that, and I noticed that, because I was doing YouTube back in 2018. My old channel, YouTube got rid of it, but I'm going to try to re-upload my older videos. But I was very critical of that. And I knew that the pro-Israel lobby was involved. And a lot of other people began to notice these things. Now, it wasn't the majority, but still, there was this noticeable rising number of Americans who were beginning to notice this reality. Wait a second, why did you pull out of the Iran deal? Now, all of a sudden, Iran is accelerating its nuclear program. Oh, because Sheldon Adelson told Donald Trump to do that. Well, why did Donald Trump move the capital of Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? Oh, because Sheldon Adelson wanted that, because the pro-Israel lobby wanted that. And there was a book, I don't know if you ever heard of it, but there was a book called The Pro-Israel Lobby by a guy named
I've heard of it.
John Mearsheimer. And John Mearsheimer wrote this book in 2007. I don't think the book sold a whole lot of copies when it first came out, because in 2007, the overwhelming majority of Americans were very pro-Israel. But I read that book in 2018. So I read that book in 2018, and I was doing videos on what I was learning from that book. And I noticed that a lot of people were agreeing with me. So I began to see this shift in 2018. And a lot of people started noticing the pro-Israel lobby. A lot of people started opening their eyes to the fact that there was this pro-Israel Zionist lobby that was very, very influential for the United States, that was pushing for the Iraq War, that was pushing for regime change in Syria and Iran. And it just went on from there. And in 2020, we had COVID, as you know. Everyone remembers this nightmare, the whole COVID thing. And in 2020, all that stuff, all that Israel stuff just sort of got pushed into the back burner. We all forgot about it because of COVID. Fast forward to 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. Russia liberates us from COVID. All of a sudden, we all just forgot about COVID in 2022. February of 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. I mean, Russia cured us from COVID. People just stopped talking about it. Nobody worried about Ukrainian soldiers catching a cold on the battlefield. And we got liberated from COVID. 2023 comes in, October of 2023, to be specific. You had the 10/7 or the October the 7th attack/massacre that happens in Israel, in southern Israel. And you would think, okay, it was obvious from the beginning that Israel allowed that to happen. I mean, I said it not too long after 10/7. I said Israel allowed it to happen. It's very obvious because Israel is this super high-tech country. It has this multi-billion-dollar security wall. You're telling me that they couldn't see a bunch of guys on motorcycles, and you're telling me they couldn't see some guy with a bulldozer? He's driving a bulldozer and he's destroying a fence. It just didn't make any sense. So it was very obvious. And this massacre of Israelis takes place. Yes, there were Israelis who were killed by the Israeli military. That is a fact. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just an established fact at this point. But Hamas did kill civilians. That's also a fact. We have documentation of that. And you would think, okay, and I think this is what the Israelis were expecting. you would think that the American people overwhelmingly would be supporting Israel's destruction of Gaza. You would think that the Western world would have been behind Israel in its flattening of Gaza, but it wasn't. Now, in America, initially, yes, it was. Not in Europe. And you saw 1 million people marching in London. You saw huge demonstrations in Greece. We've seen huge demonstrations in the Netherlands, in Scandinavia, Germany, etc. Spain, Italy, massive. And Americans were still sort of, okay, we have to support Israel. But here's the thing. In 2021, they did a study on how many Americans, what was the percentage of Americans that were pro-Israel. And in 2021, they concluded that the the criticism for Israel in the United States was at like 46%. It's still not the majority, but it's a huge minority. And that was before 10/7. So the trend, years before 2023, was already projecting this wave of anti-Israel sentiment in the United States. 10/7 happens. The majority of Americans said, we support Israel, because no country would tolerate that happening to their citizens. But then Israel goes too far. I understand going to war over what happened in 10/7. I do. I'm reasonable enough to understand that. But Israel went too far. And it turned a lot of people off. And even more people began to open their eyes, not just to what was happening in Gaza, but to the lobby. Why are all these politicians unanimously supporting Israel? Why is it that when Mamdani is doing this political debate with other candidates for the Democrat Party for becoming mayor of New York City, that Cuomo and the rest of them all say, well, if I become mayor, the first country I'm going to is Israel. They were asked, Cuomo was asked, Cuomo, where would you go if you become mayor of New York City? What would be the first country that you would visit? Oh, Israel. Okay, you. Israel. You. Israel. 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 You think all these politicians just organically woke up and said, yeah, I really want to go to Israel? No.
Yeah, it's too consistent
right,
for sure, right?
Right. And then Mamdani comes in and says, no, I would stay in New York City. I would stay here because that would be my job. My job would be to take care of New York City. And people wonder why.
I mean, you could also say it because of the Jewish population in New York, right? I mean, like, that could be it too.
What was that? Sorry?
I still think because of the Jewish population in New York City, like, maybe they're trying to appease, to that demographic for votes,
sure, of course,
as well.
Of course.
But I mean, it's probably, or both, both for sure.
Sure, yeah. That's undeniable. But the thing is that Mamdani won regardless of the Jewish voting demographic. And from what I understand and from what I have read, a lot of Jews in New York City voted for Mamdani. And so what that shows, because before, mayors of New York, or people who wanted to become mayor of New York City, were pro-Israel. And so that's why they all said the same thing. Oh yeah, Israel, 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 except for Mamdani. But Mamdani's victory, I think, is a canary in the coal mine type situation for Israel. For the first time, we see somebody who is not indifferent to Israel, but someone who is explicitly critical of Israel becoming mayor of the most Jewish city in the country. I want to say in the world, but then you have Israel. But minus Israel, it is the most Jewish city in the world. And it's the most famous city on earth, New York City. And you see a guy becoming mayor of this city, and he is explicitly pro-Palestine, explicitly critical of Israel. So now we're seeing a trend. And what the trend is going to be for politics is, are you getting AIPAC money? Are you getting pro-Israel money? And we see this trend getting kicked off. So, for example, Hakeem Jeffries, big Democrat politician, For years, that guy made a trip to Israel. Every year, he'd go to Israel. Not because he wanted to, but because AIPAC wanted him to go to Israel. So he would do these Israel trips at the behest of AIPAC. For the first time this year, he did not make that trip. He didn't make that trip. I wonder why. And for the first time, he said, I'm going to start working with J Street. J Street is a liberal Jewish political organization that I think it's not like AIPAC. I think it's more critical of Israel. But for the first time, Hakeem Jeffries comes along and says, I'm not making the AIPAC trip to Israel, and I will be working with J Street. This never happened before. So you're seeing this change happening. You're seeing this change, and it's only going to get worse. So go the word.
Oh, hold on, you're cutting out really quick.
Oh, I'm cutting out.
There you go. Oh, now you're good. You're good now.
Okay. To go back to Charlie Kirk, because I don't want to miss out on that. I don't want to just not return back to that topic. But Charlie Kirk was the guy who represented that pro-Israel narrative in the Republican Party for the young people. Because, you see, Israel already has the boomer Republicans. Israel needs to worry about the young Republicans. Israel needs to make sure that the young Republicans don't veer off down the road of Tucker Carlson or Dave Smith or tread upon the path that Megyn Kelly is currently treading upon. They don't want that, because if that happens, they lose the Republican Party. Like I said, they have already lost the Democrat Party. So
I feel like it's going so far now. I feel like, I mean, all the big names, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes is rising like super quick. I feel like, I mean, who do they have that's like as popular? Like,
nobody.
Like like I don't see anyone.
Nobody.
And those are the people that are going to be like for the youth too.
Yeah,
like,
nobody.
I don't see anyone.
Even
if they do prop up somebody, like I feel like people just be more sussed out by it.
100%. 100%. So I'll give you. There's some things that I want to say about that. So if you look at, for example, Dave Smith. Like I said, Charlie Kirk invited Dave Smith. His funders did not want him to do that. And people said, oh, that's all conspiracy theory stuff. Can I cuss here?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Bullshit.
You say whatever the fuck you want.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
bullshit. All right. It's bullshit because Candace Owens, she releases these text messages and she said, these are text messages from Charlie. Here are text conversations between Charlie and people in his organization. And he's saying, man, these funders, they don't want me to invite Tucker. They don't want me to invite Candace. They are leaving. This is what he says. He says, they are leaving me. Or sorry, better, to be more accurate, he says, they have left me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. He said this very shortly before he was murdered. He was going to go off. He was going to go off the pro-Israel trail. 100% it was going to happen.
Well, even if he went off mildly, like even if he like just vaguely, it would still be like a bigger deal because he's such a big like star, you know?
100%.
Like you could like if a small person is like super like anti like genocide and everything, but they're like a small like a creator. I feel like even just like Charlie Kirk being like mildly critical is a
100%.
bigger thing. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I see people say like, oh, maybe he was only gonna be like mildly. I'm like, even mild, like it would still be a big deal. You know?
100%. Yeah. So the pro-Israel people at the Free Press. Free Press is a big pro-Israel Zionist ran media publication. And they had this guy named Coleman Hughes. And Coleman Hughes is, I would say, right now, probably the biggest voice, at least one of the biggest voices for Zionism in the United States. Well, the Free Press sets up this debate between Coleman Hughes and Dave Smith. And I will admit, Dave Smith He was challenged by Coleman Hughes, but I will still say that Dave Smith won that debate, just given the fact that Dave Smith has the truth in this regard. But the pro-Israel people on /X kept saying, oh, Mr. Hughes won. He totally beat and crushed Dave Smith in that debate, blah, blah, blah. And then what happened? 1 or 2 days, I want to say the next day after the debate, Dave Smith has Nick Fuentes on his show.
Yeah.
And they live stream it.
Big video for sure.
Yeah, they live stream it. And it gets, last I checked, it gets over 1 million views. So the pro-Israel people kept incessantly saying, Coleman Hughes won the debate. Dave Smith is done. Dave Smith got crushed. He got vanquished in that debate. People don't give a shit. Even if Coleman Hughes won the debate, and I don't think he won the debate. My point is, those pro-Israel voices are being drowned out to the point where people don't care, to the point where they are, by huge numbers, preferring to watch Nick Fuentes than Coleman Hughes. People are preferring to watch Candace Owens over Steve Crowder. People are preferring to watch Tucker Carlson over Ben Shapiro. So the entire there's an entire paradigm shift that's happening right before our eyes, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. This is going to continue on for a long time.
I think it's going to grow, honestly.
Yeah, because once you see certain things, you can't unsee it. Once you see the pro-Israel lobby, what they did with Iraq, what they did with Libya, what they did with Syria, all the lies that got spouted for the cause of Zionism, all the lives, not just lies, but all the lives that were lost as a result of Zionism, as a result of this pro-Israel stuff. Millions of people dead in Iraq. They keep saying 1 million. I don't know why. Millions died in Iraq because of the Iraq war. Millions. Trillions of dollars lost. Not to say that money is superior to human life, but still, a lot of damage was done. And then you had all the American soldiers, thousands of American lives lost in Iraq, IEDs, snipers, etc. People just don't forget all this stuff. And then you have the fact that Israel tried to pull the United States into a war with Iran this year. They tried to pull us in. And you had Mike Waltz, who's a Zionist, who was on Trump's team, going behind Trump's back, hanging out with Netanyahu, talking with Netanyahu about a coordinated effort between the United States and Israel to go to war with Iran. And Donald Trump said, what the hell are you doing? Talking to Israel, planning a war behind my back. You're gone, Mr. Waltz. And Mike Waltz got fired from his position, and now he's working in the United Nations. Why did Donald Trump get rid of him? Because it is right now politically disadvantageous to be supporting any war for the cause of Israel. I mean, it's just the reality. And so now people say, Ted, the pro-Israel lobby, it's so powerful, it's so influential, it's so this. The pro-Israel lobby is only as powerful as the support for Israel coming out of the American population, the support of the majority of Americans. And if they lose the American people, they lose. So going back to Charlie Kirk's job, Charlie Kirk had one job. If he wanted to criticize the gay agenda, Israel doesn't care. If he wants to criticize abortion, Israel doesn't care. That's fine. His job was to make sure that young American conservatives did not veer off down the path of Tucker Carlson. That was his job. And he himself was breaking. He himself was saying, the pro-Israel donors have left me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Those are almost his exact words. He was going to leave the whole thing. And so I suspect, again, I don't have concrete evidence to prove it, and I made that clear in my video. I don't have the white paper that says, yep, Israel did what happened in Utah with Charlie Kirk. I don't have that. But it is very suspicious that Charlie Kirk gets killed, and the FBI narrative is obviously not true. At least not in its completion. So, for example, they're telling us, well, he got shot from the front. He clearly got shot from the back. That bullet hole, that hole that forms on his neck where blood is gushing out, that's an exit wound. I don't believe that bullet came from the front. Secondly,
yeah. I mean, I feel like either way, it's still sus.
It's
for
very
sure,
sus. The whole thing is very sus. And just the story about this kid that they're saying killed them. What's his name? Tyler
Robinson, I believe.
Yeah, Tyler Robinson. They're saying that he kills Charlie. He changes his clothes. He runs. He disassembles the rifle. He puts it in there, and they still can't find him after days. They still can't find him days after the murder. And he goes on to Discord, and he just writes out in detail, specific detail, what he did. And it's just, the whole thing is very questionable. I just don't believe it. And
I mean, even if it is true, I mean, I feel like just the principle of like our money going to other countries, especially if they're committing a genocide or killing other people, I feel like that issue is just like,
oh yeah.
All you really, I mean, I feel like it works for any American, like, or for anyone that has like their own country, it's like we kind of need to focus on what we're doing.
Yep,
for sure.
But I think that yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you think there's like any like connection with like Charlie Crooks with that too, or
any connection
you
between
think
what?
It's like with Charlie Crooks, like the assassination attempt
Donald
on Trump?
That's another very
do you think
fishy
there's
thing.
I
don't
another
know.
fishy thing too.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It's
It's
like,
just
who the
weird.
hell is
There's been
this?
so much fishy stuff. Yeah.
Well, this country
Because you had the thing with Epstein files too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this country is riddled with just questionable stuff. I mean, you can go all the way back to the JFK assassination. It's just, everything is fishy. And they're not going to give us the full facts of these stories. They're just not. But going back to what I was saying about Charlie Kirk, I suspect that they thought this guy's going to go off into the critical of Israel faction, the house of criticism of Israel. Might as well just get rid of him and then use his death to try to promote pro-Israel sentiment and tell people, well, Charlie was a great friend of Israel. That's what I suspect happened. The Erica Kirk thing. I mean, really, like, what is up with that? You know what I mean? Like, what is Erica Kirk? I mean, this woman has no emotion. She does a show like 2 weeks after her husband is murdered. She's giggling and acting all giddy at this show. I mean, the whole thing is just weird. Just the whole thing is weird. And we're not getting the full truth of what happened with Charlie. But I just don't believe the official narrative at all. And I think that Israel got desperate because they're thinking, we're losing America, we're losing the American people. This guy had one job, and it was to make sure that young American Republicans, remained pro-Israel. And he himself was breaking. He himself was starting to turn on us. He's of no use to us. Let's just try to get rid of him before it's too late. And as soon as Kirk gets killed, before he is even officially declared deceased, Netanyahu goes on to Twitter and says, oh, Charlie was a great guy. He was wonderful. Rest in peace. Ben-Gvir does the same thing. Oh, he was such a great friend of Israel. All of a sudden, the Israeli government names a plaza called the Charlie Kirk Plaza. It's just very, very weird. And then they do this memorial event for Charlie. And I watched it, and I'm thinking, is this a memorial event? Or is this the RNC? Is this the Republican National Convention? I mean, not fireworks, but they had this, I don't know what they call them, like these flamethrower effects. Like, you're in a monster truck rally, and you have Erica Kirk there, and she does this speech, "Oh, I forgive him." And by saying that, she was affirming the FBI narrative. And everyone who is not Erica Kirk and not in that pro-Israel mainstream narrative has been suspicious of the Kirk murder from day one. Why is the wife all of a sudden affirming the official FBI narrative? I mean, if everyone else is questioning the narrative, don't you think the wife should also be saying, hey, we want to get to the bottom of this? This is a little strange here. But she's not. She's acting giddy at the TPUSA studio. She's giggling. She's cracking jokes. And then they have this big event, and Tucker Carlson is up there. He's cracking jokes. It just, the whole thing feels fake, and it feels forced. And I just, like most people, I don't buy the official narrative at all. But I think that, if anything, Charlie Kirk should be made into an honorable Palestinian, because his death has amplified anti-Israel sentiment even more.
Okay.
Because now you have more people saying, well, I think Israel was behind it, and it hasn't. Charlie Kirk's murder has not helped Israel at all.
Right. No, I could see that for sure. Like, whether, like, you know, the story is true or not, you know, for sure. What I do want to ask though is, like, what was like your upbringing? Like, where were you born and raised, and like, what kind of got you into politics, like, later on in life and stuff?
Sure. Well, I was born in the Bay Area, California, in the city of Oakland, which is not a very great city right now, but it used to be a beautiful city. And I lived for a large chunk of my life in a small city in California called Concord, which is not too far away from Oakland. And I lived there for about 13 or 14 years or so. And my father was Muslim. You see, my dad, he was born Muslim. He was born in the West Bank, and he was raised with the religion of Islam. And he was raised to hate Jews. I mean, straight up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was raised to hate Jews. And my dad eventually went to prison. Well, not really prison, but jail for a couple of weeks in Israel. He went to an Israeli jail called, I forgot the name of the jail. But he went to jail for a couple of weeks because he was participating in an anti-Israel demonstration as a Palestinian teenager, and his crime was that he hoisted up a Palestinian flag. So he got arrested, and they put him in jail for 2 weeks. But because my dad was an American citizen, because my grandmother is American. My grandmother, well, she passed away, but my grandmother was a white American. So my grandmother was from California. It's a little weird, I know, but she was American, born and raised in Eureka, California. She married a Jordanian man who was from what is now known as the West Bank, but at that time it was under the Jordanian kingdom. And my father, they moved back, so they got married in California. They moved back to Israel, basically, because it was under, well, was it under? No, it was Jordan at that time. So they went back to technically Jordan, what is now the West Bank. And the West Bank used to be under Jordan. And my dad was born there. He was born in the West Bank. So my father was raised in the culture of Palestinian separatism and Islam, but there were Christians also in the West Bank, as they are now. And my father also had Christian friends. In fact, my father went to a Christian school for years. And then my father eventually went to jail for a couple of weeks. And while he was in jail, he got recruited by this bomb maker. His last name was Mughrabi. I forgot his first name, but his last name was Mughrabi. And Mughrabi recruited my father, and then when my dad got out of jail, Mughrabi connected my dad with a bomb, He met because Mugabe eventually got out of jail. They met. Mugabe gave my dad this bomb, and he gave my dad a mission, which was to put a bomb in a bank in Israel.
What the hell?
Yeah. So
In Israel?
In Israel, yeah. So my dad went to this bank, and my father freaked out, panicked, realized that he was going to murder people, and my father threw the bomb, and the bomb landed on the roof of the bank, and the bomb went off. My dad ran away, and nobody died, thank God. But my father, that went through this whole time of introspection in terms of he was thinking, what the hell did I do? I hope I didn't kill anybody. He wasn't thinking about the cause. He wasn't thinking about Palestinian independence. He wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. He was thinking about one thing, and that was, did I murder someone? And he was told later on, nobody died. So he was so relieved by that. But eventually my father converted to Christianity. To make a long story short, he converted to Christianity. He left Islam in the early 90s. So I was born in 1990, and my father converted to Christianity in 1993. And he left Islam, and this was really during the advent of the internet. Early 90s, people were using AOL, Instant Messenger, and email and all that stuff. And so my father was one of the first people to use the internet to argue with people. And he was arguing with Muslims online. And this was back in the earliest days of the internet. So that's kind of the environment that I grew up in. It was just an environment where politics and religion were front and center when it came to conversations. Because my father.
Oh wow! So
yeah, go ahead.
So he got you into politics then, you would say.
Oh
for
yeah.
Sure.
Oh yeah, because my dad was heavily into debating Muslims, Christian apologetics, focusing on what was happening in Israel all the time. So from the earliest days that I can remember, I was hearing about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I mean, from the earliest days that I can remember, hearing about Israel, Palestinians, Palestine, Yasser Arafat, the Likud party. I mean, just the whole.
You're soaking all that in.
Yeah, just the whole. I grew up with it. So my dad became, because of what happened with the bomb and what happened with him converting to Christianity, he had this massive change in heart where he said, I denounce all terrorism. I don't want to see Jews being killed. I don't want to see Palestinians being killed. I want peace. So my father became very critical of the Palestinian movement because of its embracing of terrorism, which is a very legitimate criticism. And so my father was debating Muslims, but you see, I was raised in that environment, and I was raised to be pro-Israel. The problem, and my dad himself will admit to this, the problem was that we were raised to be pro-Israel, but we weren't being told to criticize Israel. We weren't given the other side of the coin. It was just, well, we have to have peace. Palestinians embrace terrorism, which is true to a great extent. It's true. And we have to reject it. And I do reject terrorism. I don't believe in terrorism. Terrorism only breeds more terrorism, as we've seen in Gaza. But as I got older, I began to open my eyes more. So when I was in high school, I was very pro-Israel. I would debate other people about Israel. I would debate other students about Israel, teachers at times about Israel. And because that's what I was raised to be. I was raised to believe that. And then in 2013, I went through, I guess you could call, my Charlie Kirk moment. My Charlie Kirk moment, my Candace Owens moment. So my father became famous. For lack of better words, he became famous. Because my father, you can look him up, his name is Waleed Shoebat. He's got tons of videos on YouTube. My dad was all over the media. He was a celebrity. So my father was the first, or at least one of the first people to start using the internet to talk about Islam and Islamic terrorism and those things. And most people did not care about Islam in the 1990s. Islam was not an issue. It wasn't a focus at all. It just wasn't. People were thinking about and caring about other things. People were more worried about Russia in the 1990s than they were about Islamic terrorism. Then my dad started going to church in the 90s, and he was going to this Baptist church, I remember. It was in Walnut Creek, California, and my father was telling people about Islam and the church. So anytime someone had a question about Muslims or Islam, they would go to my dad. But most people in the church didn't care about Islam. It wasn't an issue that people were really focusing on. Then 9/11 happened, and our lives changed completely. Just overnight, our lives changed. Phone was ringing all day. Everybody wanted to talk to my dad. Everybody at the church wanted to talk to my dad. All these media outlets wanted to get my dad on their shows to interview him. Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, BBC, all these outlets. So for years, my dad worked as a political commentator and as a commentator in regards to Islamic terrorism. So because of my dad's celebrity status, that attracted funders, people who wanted to give my dad money. And because anytime you become known in the world of political discourse, I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican, you're going to have these people who are going to want to contribute lots of money to your cause because they want to control you. They want to use you. They have an agenda. And let's say you become a famous streamer, and let's say, well, you're already a famous streamer. Go ahead. Sorry.
Or could you say that? Could you say that again? You cut out.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
Let's say you're something. Something like that.
Let's say, so you're a streamer. Let's say you become a political streamer and you blow up. Boom! You got thousands of people watching you during a live stream. People start donating money to you. You're gonna have at least one wealthy person giving you a decent amount of money. And so eventually my dad got approached by this billionaire pro-Israel couple. This was the same couple who founded a big media outlet. It's not big anymore, but it used to be. But they founded a media outlet that used to be pretty big. It's called PJ Media or Pajamas Media. Steve Crowder started out on Pajamas Media. That was his first big media role before he became famous. Or sorry, after.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, after, because Steve Crowder began as just a YouTube guy. He was doing videos in front of his camera.
Right.
And then he became big. When he became big, he started out with PJ Media.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So my dad was in that circle. And this couple were funding our website, shootbot.com, which is still in operation. And they were giving us money for one reason, and it was to be pro-Israel. They wanted us to advance the pro-Israel narrative. Now, when they started giving us money, they didn't say, "All right, here's the money, and this is what we want you to do." No. What they did was they just gave us money. They come out and they say, "Well, we really like your cause, and we really like what you have to say, so here's money." And you go, "Okay, great." But they give you that money with the expectation, with the hope that you're going to continue to do what they like what you do. That you are going to continue to say what they like. Once you deviate, that's when they start giving you the warnings. So for years, my dad was being funded by these people. And one day I told my dad, we got to start talking about the gay agenda. Because, you see, this was back in 2012, 2013. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was this whole situation back in the day where you had these pro-Sodom, I call them Sodom, referencing the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. But you had these activists who were pro-Sodom who were going around to Christian bakeries or Christian businesses, and they were asking these businesses to do things that were against their beliefs, that were against their Christian beliefs. And so there was the most famous case that took place in Colorado where you had these gay activists or these pro-Sodom activists, and they went to this Christian bakery. There was the infamous Christian bakery story. And they said, we want you to bake us a cake. Bake us a cake for a gay wedding. And the baker said, well, I can bake you a cake, but I'm not going to put Bob and Steve on the cake. I'm just going to give you the cake. And they said, no, we demand that you put Bob and Steve. Now, I don't know what their names were, but I'm just using that as an example. They said, we want you to put Bob and Steve, and he refused. So they sued the Christian baker, and they won. And that baker ended up having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars and all this nonsense. So I said, we really have to talk about this agenda. So I really, really started talking about it. I was talking about it before, to be fair, but I really intensified my efforts. And I began to talk about it pretty much on a daily basis. And the donors contacted us and they said, listen, we just wanted you guys to be pro-Israel. Why are you guys talking about this gay agenda stuff? And we said, well, we're Christians, and that's what we believe. That's what we believe. They said, well, if you keep talking about this, we're going to pull out the money. And we said, well, we're going to keep talking about this. And they pulled out the money. They cut us off. At that time, I was reading St. Ambrose of Milan. So just to go back a little bit, my father was raised Muslim, converted to Christianity. I forgot to say what type of Christianity. He became basically a Baptist or an evangelical. And in that type of Christianity, it's very pro-Israel. But that type of Christianity, Protestantism, evangelicalism, it's very vacuous of history. It doesn't connect with ancient Christianity at all. It's a very modern phenomenon. So at that time, I was reading a lot of the church fathers, and I was reading Augustine, but I was also reading Ambrose of Milan. And before that experience, I remember, we're talking like a day before or a few days before, I was reading this letter from St. Ambrose of Milan where he's talking about the synagogue. And he was warning about the synagogue, how the synagogue is anti-Christian. The synagogue is anti-Christ. And I remember one day getting this email from this guy who was friends with those funders, but he was also connected to us at the same time. And I remember he sent me this email, and he was saying, stop ranting about the gay agenda. Stop ranting about this stuff. And I didn't want to email him back. I wanted to call him to make it more personal. So I gave him a call, and he's just, right from the beginning, aggressive. I mean, just aggressive. Raising his voice, trying to intimidate me, saying things like, we're going to lose the money. You're going to lose the money. Stop talking about this stuff. And I said to him, listen. And I said to him, this, I mean, it's a crazy story, but I said to him, listen, I said, I think something else is controlling you other than money. And I didn't say the devil or the diabolical, but that's what I meant. And I said to him, it's not about just being pro-Israel. Because he said, this is what he told me. He said, our mission, our job is to bash Islam and to love Israel. This is what he told me. To love Israel. Those words, to love Israel. He said, our job is to go against Islam and to love Israel. And I said, well, it's not just about loving Israel. There's other things in this war that we're in. There's other things in this struggle that we're in. And he ended up yelling, and I basically told him to go take a hike, and I hung up the phone on him. And when I hung up the phone, this thought came to my mind that said, St. Ambrose was right. That guy was right. And so I was going through this spiritual shift in my life where I was transitioning from typical, I don't even want to call it Protestantism, because Protestantism to me, like when I'm thinking Protestantism, I'm thinking Luther, like Martin Luther, Anglicanism, Episcopalianism, right? That's Methodism, that's Protestantism. You know, Church of Norway, Church of England, that's Protestantism. I wasn't a Protestant, but I was your typical pro-Israel, I wouldn't say typical, to be fair to myself, but I was a part of that world. Pro-Israel, evangelical, all that. And I was going through this transition in my life where I was shifting from being in that cookie-cutter Christian world to being someone connected to that ancient Christian tradition, St. Ambrose of Milan, St. Augustine, etc. But there was another thing that I was opening my eyes to, and that was the reality of pro-Israel donors, pro-Israel donor elites using money to control people. And I told my father, I said, they are using money to control us. That's what this is about. They're not giving us money because they like us. They're not giving us money because they really love what we have to say. They're giving us money with strings attached. That's the bottom line. So this was my awakening, so to speak. And that was in 2013. So, but the pro-Israel stuff, the little pro-Israel stuff was still in me, but it was beginning to erode. And then in 2014, so the following year, I met with this Catholic activist. And we were talking on the phone, and I told him this story, the story that I just told you. And he says to me, Ted, what you experienced or what you witnessed was not an isolated incident. This is not an isolated incident. He says, Ted, the pro-Israel donors dominate the conservatives and they dominate the liberals. He says they dominate pretty much the entire political spectrum in American society. And I thought he was exaggerating, but I started looking more into this. In fact, he even told me, and this I don't want to deviate into another topic here, but and maybe I think this actually links to the other things that that pertain to this subject, now that I think about it. But he said to me, Ted, they fund the racist movement, the racist groups in this country. And I thought he was lying to me at that point. And I said, really? And I was very oblivious at this age. I was only about 23 years old. 23, 24.
The objective to make them look better by funding them, so they can be the victim or something, or
that's a good question.
Else?
So I'll get into that, but the story connects to the answer to that question, I would say. So I asked him to explain more about this. What do you mean? How does that make any sense? He said, Ted, they have, I don't want to say the J word because I don't want to get you or myself in trouble here, but he said the pro-Israel donors back, for lack of better words, racist or white supremacist groups, white supremacist figures. And I didn't believe him. I thought he was lying to me, or at least exaggerating something. And I said, well, could you explain more? Can you elaborate more into that? And he said, yeah. He said, I want to tell you a story. So he starts telling me this story about how he was invited to speak at this event in New York City. He said, I was invited. This guy, he was an expert on Islam. This guy that I'm talking about. His name was Andrew B. Azad. You can look him up. In fact, he did a number of talks about Islam years ago, but that's his name if you want to look him up. He's on YouTube. And he told me this story. He said, I was invited to speak at this event in New York City, and I was invited to talk about Islam. And this was, I forget which year it was. It could have been 2010 or so, 2011. And he said, okay, so he lives in, at that time, he was in Connecticut. So he drove all the way to NYC, New York City. And they rented out, the people who organized the event rented out this bar and restaurant, bar and grill place. And he went to the event. He spoke. And I know that he spoke there because there's a video on YouTube of him speaking at this event. And he gave his talk. And you'll see, I mean, there's a video of him speaking at this event in New York City. But he said, when I was done with that event, when I was done talking, the event finished. And the speakers and the organizers went to the bar. And this is when things got interesting, because some of them got drunk. And he said, Ted, I witnessed pro-Israel people. We're talking, some of these people are Jewish. I'll just put it that way. They're drunk, and they're saying, death to the Arabs, a good Arab is a dead one. Hitler had the right idea. If only Hitler would have just killed the Arabs, etc., etc. And he said, Ted, I was so shocked by this. And I thought, lying to me, is this bullshit? What is this? But he said, Ted, I saw this with my own eyes. Now, I know for a fact that he spoke at this event because there's video of it. But I thought maybe he was exaggerating something or making it up. I didn't know. So then about over 2 years later, so 2016, so about 2 years later, or less than 2 years later, I was looking at the whole migrant crisis situation. Remember the whole migrant crisis situation that happened in 2015 in Europe? You had all these like hundreds of thousands of migrants from Syria and other countries going into Germany. That was a really big, that was a huge political explosion, really. So I remember at first, there was a whole lot of right-wing content about that. They were saying, oh, Europe's being invaded and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I fell into that way of thinking for some time. And one day I was looking at Breitbart.com. Breitbart used to be a really big conservative media outlet. It was actually the #1 website for conservatives, at least in America. Could have been the biggest conservative website in the world, but definitely it was #1 in the United States. And I remember looking at Breitbart, and they had this article about how the German government was planning on using male Syrian migrants to train them in the art of bomb making and espionage, and give them all this paramilitary training, and then send them into Syria to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, who was the leader of Syria until late last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I saw that, and I thought to myself, okay, hold on. This whole migrant thing is not what they're saying it is. There's something else going on here. So I'm sitting in front of my computer. I'm sitting at the very desk that I'm speaking to you from, looking at the computer. And I think to myself, oh my God, like this thought just came to my mind like a light bulb. They're bringing in the migrants to revive nationalism. To be more explicit than that, because the thought that came to my mind didn't really say that. What it said, what this light bulb, what this little realization said was, they're bringing the migrants to revive Hitlerism.
Wow.
That's what I started thinking. Like, there's something else going on here, because I began to notice that far right politics all of a sudden was seeing this revival. So I start researching the political situation in Germany, and I read up on this party called the AfD Party, Alternative for Deutschland Party, which is right now the second biggest
They're being
party.
killed or no?
What's that?
Aren't there like politicians there getting
A
killed?
number of them have supposedly, dropped dead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a big number too.
Yeah,
I forgot how many.
It's too many to be coincidental. There's something going on with that. But the Alternative for Deutschland currently is the second largest party in the German parliament. And it is as far as the statistics go, it is the most popular party in all of Germany, is the AfD party. So if they had an election right now, AfD would be number one in the parliament. And
wow.
yeah, they're huge. And so the AfD in 2016 was a very small party. It was a very small party. I don't think they even had any seats in the Bundestag at that point. I could be wrong about that, but they were nonetheless a very small party. But nonetheless, at that time, they were growing in popularity. And I started researching them. And I started reading about how there were Nazis in their ranks, and they were just ultra-nationalist. And I began to read about how there was this collaboration between the right wing in America, some people in the American right, and the AfD in Germany. But not just the AfD, but far-right neo-Nazis in Germany were working with people in the United States to try to promote their cause. And they were using this migrant crisis as a way to promote their own cause, which is Nazism, or reviving Hitlerism and all that. So I started noticing this stuff. And I thought, oh my goodness, maybe that guy was right. Maybe that story was true, because I began to see how pro-Israel people in the United States were backing German nationalism, backing this AfD party, backing this movement, this far-right movement. So I called that guy up and I said, hey, can you tell me that story again? And he told me the story again. And I said, do you mind if I record you? And he said, no, I don't mind. So I recorded him saying, I still have that video. I need to find it. I have it in an external hard drive somewhere, but I want to re-upload it maybe one day. But he recounted the story. And I said, do you remember the names of the people in that event? He said, I remember two of them. And I said, give them to me. He gave me the names, and I looked up the names. And both of these guys, I do not remember their names, but both of these guys were pro-Israel. Both of these guys were members of a pro-eugenics organization called American Renaissance, which is pro-social Darwinism, pro-eugenics, the whole basically like 20th century style racist. And they were in this organization. And at that moment, I was 100% convinced this guy was not lying to me. This guy was telling me the truth. And I was totally convinced. So I began to see how there was this convergence, there was this bridge that was made between the pro-Israel faction and the far-right / racist faction, and they're working together. So I started writing on this stuff, started really writing up on this stuff. And I remember there was this guy in my circle, I don't want to give names, but there was this guy in my circle, he was pro-Israel, hardcore pro-Israel guy. Hasbris is just Hasbris just means propagandist for Israel. He was a propagandist for Israel, and I knew this guy for years. I knew this guy going all the way back when I was in high school. He was working with my father in doing activism work about Islamic terrorism, activism work in support of Israel. And I remember talking to him on the phone about what I was writing about. And I said, I'm writing about this revival in Nazism that's taking place. And he says to me, I kid you not, he says to me, there's no money in that. There's no money in that. In other words, this guy who was so pro-Israel, he was so hardcore pro-Israel. This guy, like, if you want an idea of what kind of guy this was, okay, just think of a poorer version of Ben Shapiro. That was this guy.
Okay.
Even his voice was like Ben Shapiro's. His cadence, personality was like Ben Shapiro, but he just didn't have the money of Ben Shapiro. That's what this guy was. That just to give you an image of how this guy looked and acted like. But he said, "There's no money in that," and that was a big shocker for me, because here I'm thinking, this guy's so pro-Israel. Of course, he would support me warning people about this rise in Nazism, this attempt to revive Nazism, but he doesn't care. He wants me to just bash the Muslims. That's what he wanted me to do. He goes, you need to just bash the Muslims. Don't talk about this nationalism stuff. Don't talk about this white nationalism stuff. Don't talk about this attempt to revive Nazism. No. Just bash the Muslims, support Israel. And this was another wake-up call. And I mean, I have other stories like this, but I can give you more if you want. But it was all these little things began to make me think. And I'll give you another story. So I was doing a lot of research into the cartels in Mexico. This was in 2015. So this is before 2016, before I was writing up on the Nazi stuff. I was looking heavily into the cartels in Mexico. And I don't know if you remember this, but back in like 2013, 14, 15, there were these people called autodefensas in Mexico. These were farmers who were fighting the cartels in the Mexican state of Michoacan. I mean, these guys were getting into bloody, intense gun battles with the cartels in the rural part of Mexico, in Michoacan specifically. And I remember we had this organization, we still have it, but we were helping some of these people in Mexico. We were helping people, for example, there was this woman who, her husband was a member of the Autodefensa. And he was in this village watch group where they were making sure that the village was protected. And the village priest disappeared. And there was a rumor that he had been kidnapped or something. So the local Autodefensa guys got together and they said, okay, let's have a little search team. So they're trying to look for this priest. Turned out the priest was not kidnapped. The rumor was false. But one of these Autodefensa guys, one of these village watch guys got ambushed as he was trying to find the priest. He got ambushed by the local cartel guys. And it was on the Mexican media. Well, I knew the guy who got murdered, I knew his brother. I interviewed his brother. I did a documentary on Mexico called Hell Across the Border. YouTube took it down, but it's somewhere online. I need to re-upload it onto maybe Rumble.
Why'd they take it down?
Because there was some violence in it. So they said, oh, it was on YouTube for years. And then one day, last year, I think they got rid of it. But for many years, since 2015 or 16, it was on YouTube. And then eventually they took it down, which is bullshit because everything on there was for educational reasons. But anyway, it was a very well, I mean, I'm not blowing smoke up my own ass, but it was a very well done documentary. I interviewed a lot of people. You still have
the video file though, right?
I still have the video file, yeah. I spent about a year on that documentary. I interviewed people, I did subtitles, translation. I put a lot of work into it, many hours into that documentary. But I interviewed the guy who was murdered. I interviewed his brother. His brother is in the documentary. So I contacted him and I said, man, I'm really sorry about what happened. Your brother got murdered. And he was very sad about it, obviously. And I said, does his wife need anything? Because his brother was married. And he said, let me get back to you on that. So he gets back to me and he says, listen, I think my brother's widow can pursue like government funding or government welfare to get some extra help. I think she'll be fine for now. I said, okay, well, let me know if she needs anything. Because we were helping some of these people out. And he said, okay. I said, listen, if she needs help, get back to us and we'll help her financially if she needs help financially. So this pro-Israel guy who was in our group, the poorer version of Ben Shapiro, so to speak, we told him, we said, listen, this guy, if he gets back to us and his sister-in-law needs help, we're going to help him. And he said, yeah, okay, fine. He didn't disagree. So about a year passes. A year later, maybe even more. No, I think it was no, actually, no, it wasn't a year. It was like almost, I would say a year and a half, almost 2 years later. This guy gets back to us and he says, hey, could you help my brother's widow? And we said, yeah, we promised we would help her. So we agreed to help her out. We call this guy up, this pro-Israel guy, this retail Ben Shapiro guy. And we said, hey, remember that agreement that we made that if this guy calls us up about his sister-in-law, we'll help her out? He said, yeah, I remember. I said, well, we got the call, so we're going to send some money over. And how much money? Well, we agreed to send, I think it was like, what was it? I think it was like $3,000, $5,000, something like that, which is a lot of money over there. And the first words that come out of this guy's mouth is, well, that's a lot of money. And maybe we should give her a loan. And we could get the payments back here and there. We can get the payments in piece. We can get the payments piecemeal back from her. And I think he was even talking about charging interest. I don't remember about the interest part, but he wanted to give this woman a loan. And I remember being so fucking angry. You can't imagine. I was so angry at this guy. He wants to give this a woman who we agreed to help, whose husband was murdered by the cartel because he was a member of a Village Watch group. And you want to give this woman a loan and get the money back from her as if you're a fucking bank. I was so angry. Like my blood was boiling. And we said, no, we're going to give her the money. And that's fucking it. That's it. So he said, okay, whatever. And he didn't argue and that was it. But like that moment, that little moment where he showed his true colors was another huge wake-up call for me. It was another, I guess you could say, Kirk moment where I began to really open my eyes to what these people were about. Money. It's just money, 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 money. And he wanted me to bash the Muslims and to praise Israel because to him, that's what was advantageous. That's all he cared about. It wasn't helping people. It wasn't warning people about serious issues. It was worshiping Israel, bash the Muslims because the Muslims are the big threat to Israel. That's what it was. So that was in 2017. 2018.
Okay.
So that loan moment, that was in 2017. So 2018 comes in. And I start reading John Mearsheimer's book, The Pro-Israel Lobby, which is an amazing book. I think I have it here. Hold on a second. This book right here. So I bought this book in 2018. I bought it. I forgot. I think I got it on Amazon. And I said, I'm reading it by John Mearsheimer. If you have not read this book, and I'm not getting money to advertise this book, I just keep telling people to read this book because it'll open your eyes. This book...
shit.
What's that?
I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah, it'll open your eyes. And John Mearsheimer wrote this book in 2007. And this book was not popular when it came out. It just wasn't. Because... in 2007, the overwhelming majority of Americans were pro-Israel. But in 2018, I was running my YouTube channel. And at this point in 2018, I was in a fierce battle with the pro-Israel people who were in our organization. Like it was a Charlie Kirk type moment where we hated each other. Like the loan thing was the straw that broke the camel's back with me. That loan thing was like, I fucking hate this guy. Fuck you. Fuck you. Like that was my mentality. Fuck you. And I wanted to piss these people off. We had an organization. We still do, but these people aren't with us anymore. We had an organization with these people. And it was like TPUSA, okay, but much smaller. Just to give you some perspective. And I hated these people so much. I said, I'm going to do YouTube videos just shitting on Israel. I still have those
Holy
videos.
shit.
Yeah, I need to re-upload them. They're all on my external hard drive. And I started doing video commentary on everything that I had been learning in this book right here. And man, oh man, I pissed.
So like well, how would you explain like your political ideology? So like well, how would you explain like your political ideology? Like
Oh,
if
okay.
you know, like I guess like a summary, you know. Like where do you lean towards? Do you have like do you lean right on some things, left on others? Like how would you kind of sum yourself up a little bit?
I do not consider myself right wing, but nor do I consider myself left wing. I try my best to follow truth. And I know that sounds kind of cringe and kind of trite, but for example, when I was reading up on the Israel lobby, my views at that time, the right wing have been wrong many times. They've been wrong. I mean, the Iraq War is the biggest example of that. The biggest example of that is the Iraq War. The right wing has, to be honest with you, the right wing has been completely hoodwinked by many different types of people for years. And I've noticed this since I was in high school.
Do you feel like the woke culture was kind of created to make people like go to war? Almost to a degree.
I think the woke culture. That's a good question. I think the woke culture was completely fabricated.
You think it was like orchestrated, not organic?
Yeah, I don't think it was organic at all, because if it was organic, it would be popular. But it was the woke faction or the woke ideology was never popular in this country. Never. It started out. So just to give you a short answer to your question, because I don't want to go on for 20 minutes explaining my thought on this, but just to give you the short answer,
brother.
just to give you the short answer first, I think that wokeism was promoted for the purpose of reviving nationalism in this country. That's what I believe, because
I can see that, yeah.
Because that's exactly what happened. Now again, it could be coincidence, but that's exactly what happened. What happened was wokeism was pushed, and they were promoting these articles that were so just, I don't know, so disconnected from reality that you had to just question if the person who wrote this really meant anything they wrote. So for example, you would see these articles that would say things like, lifting weights is far right. Like, who writes this stupid shit? Lifting weights is far right. If you lift weights, you could be a racist. Right? Just dumb, stupid shit that nobody believes.
Yeah.
Nobody really believes that. Nobody.
Right.
But what did that do? It created this huge meme that, hey, it's like reverse psychology.
Right.
If I tell you, do something, you don't do it because you don't like being told what to do.
Right.
So if I say, hey, don't do this, you do the opposite because you don't like being told what to do. So if they say, hey, lifting weights, man, you could become a far right extremist. And all these people online were saying, what? Well, I guess I'm a far right extremist.
It makes you want to like fucking watch Terminator and fucking start lifting weights.
Exactly.
And shit, you know.
Exactly.
Like,
So then
kind of the opposite. Yeah.
Right. So then weightlifting becomes the opposite of woke. So I'm going to lift weights more. Now, remember, America, I don't think this is the case now, but for some time, America had a lot of problems with obesity and all this stuff. And I think, so America is in competition with Russia. That's indisputable. America is in competition with Russia. Russians, and I've known this for a long time, Russians have a much stronger culture of lifting weights and fighting and being fit than America does. I'm not saying there's no fit people.
They're more cohesive, I would say.
More cohesive, yes, more united than we are. And that's good for Russia, but it's not good for the American empire. And so America is seeing this, and they're thinking, man, we got to get our people in line. We got to get them to stop being lard asses, get them in line, get them to like being fit, get them to want to be fit. How do we do that? Well, all of a sudden, you start seeing Jocko Willink. I don't know if you remember him, but he had this podcast. He's still there, but I don't think it's as popular as it used to be. But Jocko Willink had a pretty big podcast for years. He is a Navy SEAL. He was in charge of the Navy SEAL training program for years. He's a pretty big deal in the Navy SEAL world. He starts this podcast telling people, hey, get in shape, lift weights, do kettlebells, etc. Joe Rogan does the same thing, and he's the biggest podcaster in the world. Then you had David Goggins. David Goggins comes in and says, hey, stay hard, run, be fit, lift weights, get on the treadmill, whatever, be in shape. So fitness was getting promoted a lot, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying this in light of wokeism. So woke comes along and says, be fat, fat is good. And they were getting all these fat, left-wing, third-wave feminists who were hideous and annoying and obnoxious. And they were just people that were not appealing at all. Not marketable people at all. They weren't people that, generally speaking, people could look to and say, wow, I really want to follow these people, right? Nobody wants to follow these fat feminists with purple hair. But those people were getting pushed. And anyone who knows anything about marketing knows that those types of people are not marketable. So why would you do that unless you knew damn well that you would get the opposite effect of what you claimed that you wanted? You claim you want wokeism, but then you use the most unmarketable people in the country to push your ideology. Why would you do that?
Or they could be like or they're appeasing to fat people because there's a lot of fat fucks here.
That's true, but it's still not marketable because I mean, you watch a Hollywood movie, it's full of good-looking people. Why? Because they know that's what sells. You watch a James Bond film, they don't have a fat Bond, they don't have fat women, it's all good-looking people. Same thing with modeling, same thing with clothes, same thing with products, even like beer commercials. I mean, your average person who's drinking beer doesn't look like the people that you see in the beer commercials. So
yeah, they had like that shampoo was like, it was like different shapes or something to like symbolize like people are
really?
shaped differently.
I don't remember.
It was so dumb. It was so dumb.
I mean, yeah, it's just terrible marketing.
But yeah, I totally agree with you though, for sure.
Yeah, so what you do to get people to hate fat culture and all that stuff is, well, you just promote wokeism. Like if I wanted to get people to hate wokeism or to hate the left, I wouldn't just tell people, hey, hate the left. That's what conservatives have been doing for decades. Right. What I would do is exactly what the woke did. I would have gotten these woke people who are fat fucks, purple hair, nose piercings, they look like shit, annoying, obnoxious people, and I would say, okay, here is the left. And the thing is that the left, what we call the left, Democrats, these people, Kamala Harris and her ilk, they embraced wokeism. AOC was embracing that bullshit. And the straw that broke the camel's back was what? It was that putting that cross-dresser for the Bud Light beer cans.
Oh yeah, their stock went down when that happened.
Yeah, stock went down. Yeah, stock went down. Everything went down. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I remember going to Target. I remember Target for years was big on the woke stuff. They were big on gay month, gay pride month. Every July, they would have the rainbows everywhere and all that stuff. And I remember, I want to say, I remember this year in July, going to Target. I didn't see any LGBT stuff. At least not in the in-your-face way they were doing it. It was gone. Gone. Done. Why? Because
I feel like the companies don't care really about that.
What's
it's
that?
More about money, you know. I feel like companies don't really care. It doesn't seem genuine when they do stuff like that. It's Like they think that that's what people want or
Right.
something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so they realize, wait, this is actually bad for business. And they stop doing it. But what the woke thing, again, I could be wrong. Maybe it's not a conspiracy. Maybe it's all coincidental, whatever.
It could be some truth to it too. It could be a little bit of both. You
A
never
little bit
know.
of both, right? Could be. But regardless of the case, what happened was you had this right-wing surge as a response to wokeism.
Do you feel like it's the same thing with the whole like the mass immigration protests in Europe with Israel? Do you think that is it's kind of like that? It's like they're using that in a way to get alliance.
You're talking about the migrant crisis?
Yeah, like you think it's kind of like how like the woke culture was like not organic.
Right.
You think like maybe like you think
Yeah.
something's up with that. Maybe it's orchestrated as well.
Well, I remember when the migrant crisis was first happening, there was a report that came out from the German Marshall Fund, which is a big American German think tank. It's basically an extension of NATO. It's a NATO outlet, U.S. government, German government outlet. And their whole specialty is, well, to talk about Germany and Europe, the politics of Germany and Europe in general. And I remember the German Marshall Fund released a report on the migrant situation. And they said that the migrant situation is going to cause a shift in the politics of Europe. Now, they didn't say if it was going to turn to the right, but that's pretty much what they meant, because that's exactly what happened. In other words, they knew exactly what they were doing. Angela Merkel, who was this very popular chancellor in Germany, she served as the German chancellor for many years. She was very much against multiculturalism in Germany. When she first got elected, I want to say it was in 2009 or 10, she made a speech saying multiculturalism does not work. You can look this up. It was actually very controversial for her to say this, but she said this. She said multiculturalism does not work. The burqa doesn't fit in Europe. Islamic culture does not fit in European culture. Bottom line. Then fast forward to 2015. Migrant crisis is in full swing. Germany is in the throes of this whole disastrous situation where you have hundreds of thousands of people from Syria going to Germany. And what does Angela Merkel say? She says, we can do it. We must absorb these migrants. Wait a second, Angela. When you first got elected, you said multiculturalism doesn't work. It doesn't fit in Europe. But now you're saying we can make it work. And what that tells me is that she knew damn well that it wasn't going to work, that the migrant crisis was going to lead to an even deeper crisis. The German Marshall Fund, as I've already said that this migrant crisis is going to cause a major political shift in Germany. Well, a major political shift did happen in Germany. What was that? Exactly what we all expected it to be. It was the revival of far-right ideology in Germany. And the migrant crisis was something that was really accelerated by NATO. They armed the rebels. They wanted Bashar al-Assad to be gone. They wanted a war in Syria. They wanted a war against Syria. For many years, the journalist, what's his name? Was it Hirsch? Seymour Hersh, very famous American journalist. He wrote that you could go all the way back to, what was it? The early 2000s. I want to say 2008, 2009. And you could read about how the CIA was unleashing Al-Qaeda fighters into Syria to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. So the United States floods Syria with Al-Qaeda, trains Al-Qaeda, CIA trained Al-Qaeda to go into Syria to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad is now forced to fight Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has always been a part of American foreign policy. Always. They've always been in bed. All this bullshit about how, oh, we're enemies, all that's nonsense. I don't believe it. Same thing with the Taliban. We had this years-long war with the Taliban only for the Taliban to run Afghanistan. The whole thing is bullshit. But they unleash Al-Qaeda into Syria to fight against Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad does an interview with Barbara Walters back in 2012 or 2013, one of those years. Barbara Walters is trying to portray Bashar al-Assad as this evil tyrant. Bashar al-Assad tells her, we're fighting Al-Qaeda. Well, who flooded Syria with Al-Qaeda? It was NATO. The Americans, the British, the Germans, the French, they wanted Al-Qaeda. They wanted these Islamists to rise up to overthrow Bashar al-Assad because Bashar al-Assad was an ally of Russia. He was a Russian asset. And so NATO caused this migrant crisis. They kept blaming Bashar al-Assad. Well, if Bashar al-Assad was the reason why all these people fled, then why don't these people want to go back to Syria? He's not there anymore. Because Al-Qaeda is running Syria. America put Al-Qaeda in power. So America sparked all this, started all this. Migrants go into Germany. NATO knows full well that it's going to cause a major political shift in Germany, and it does. Nationalism is now at the highest it has ever been in Germany since the 1930s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's huge. And another thing that is on the rise in Germany is militarism. So and the AfD party, which is now the most popular party in Germany, is heavily militaristic. They want to bring back mandatory recruitment. They want to bring back the draft. They're the most pro-draft or mandatory enlistment party in Germany. They are the most pro-military party in Germany. They want to revive old-style German military culture. They have made it clear that they want to integrate civilian culture with military culture. And so with the rise in nationalism, you also have the rise in militarism in Germany. And if you do some research on NATO's interest in reviving nationalism in Europe, what you will find is that for decades, NATO, the United States, has wanted to see a revival in Germany. How do I know that? Look up Operation Gladio. Gladio. Operation Gladio. Operation Gladio was a NATO operation that was conducted by American intelligence, British intelligence, German intelligence, French, Spanish, Norwegian, Belgian, Turkish intelligence as well. And their mission was to see nationalism being revived in Europe. Why did they want nationalism to be revived in Europe? Because they wanted to use the European far right as a proxy against the Russians. In this case, the Soviet Union. This is Cold War. Cold War policy. Well, what else was Cold War policy? Arming the Mujahideen. The Americans armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to fight against the Soviets. And they kept saying, well, the Cold War is over in the 1990s. But what else was happening in the 1990s? The United States was arming Al-Qaeda. The United States was arming and backing bin Laden's movement. The very person that they blamed 9/11 on, the United States was using as a CIA asset against the Serbs and against the Russians. That's why the United States armed the Chechen Jihad in the North Caucasus. That's why they used Al-Qaeda to fight in Bosnia against the Serbs, because the Serbs were an ally of Russia. in the 1990s. They still are. So the policy of arming the Mujahideen during the Cold War did not stop with the end of the Cold War. It continued on. Therefore, my conclusion is the policy of arming and backing neo-Nazis during the Cold War, which is what NATO was doing, did not stop at the end of the Cold War. It continued on. We know this for a fact because if you look at, for example, Ukraine is still a big topic today. For many years, the United States has been arming and backing Ukrainian neo-Nazis. Azov Battalion, Right Sector. These were neo-Nazis. They're still there, but these are neo-Nazis who have been backed by NATO. And just recently, Chatham House. Chatham House is a major British think tank. This happened just a couple of weeks ago. But Chatham House, which is a major British think tank that is connected to the British government, invited a major Ukrainian neo-Nazi to speak at their event. And this guy is, if you ever look at him, he has the typical Hollywood look of a neo-Nazi. The shaved head, the tattoos.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, just the guy is just a Nazi. And here he is. Shit. Yeah, here he is talking for the British mainstream. Why is that? Why is Chatham House bringing in? His name is Karas, by the way. I forgot his last name, but his first name, his last name is Karas, I believe. Karas. Major neo-Nazi. Part of the Azov Right Sector movement in Ukraine. And Karas is in cahoots with Ukrainian intelligence. Well, Ukrainian intelligence is integrated with British and American intelligence. Why is that? Because America has always been using neo-Nazis to go against the Russians. I'll give you another story that happened recently. Look at Mr. Navalny. Alexei Navalny. Alexei Navalny he's dead, but he was for years Putin's biggest political threat, Alexei Navalny. For many years, the Western mainstream media empire was praising Navalny as this great man who's going to fight against Putin. He's going to bring freedom because Putin is this big evil tyrant, right? This evil, Putin is just the devil. Putin is the devil. If you really believe what NATO says about Putin, you think this guy's the devil. I mean, Joe Biden said, I looked into Putin's eyes and I saw no soul. He's just the epitome of evil. And so the Americans were propping up this Alexei Navalny guy to replace Putin. The Washington Post was saying, oh, Navalny's great, and all these Western media outlets were praising Navalny. Well, guess what ideology Navalny subscribed to? Ultranationalism. Navalny, for many years, participated in white nationalist demonstrations in Russia. He referred to immigrants as cockroaches and as basically a disease that we have to purge out of Russia. He always hung out with neo-Nazis. He collaborated with neo-Nazis. The guy was a Nazi. And Putin condemned Navalny as a Nazi. Putin was saying, we cannot allow these Nazis to take over Russia. But that's who the West was backing. NATO was backing this far-right ultra-nationalist fanatic named Alexei Navalny. Just like Chatham House brings Mr. Karas over, and he's a full-blown Ukrainian neo-Nazi. And for years, the Americans had Azov designated as a terrorist organization. And then, what was it? I think under Obama or under Trump or Biden, just a number of years ago, the U.S. government says Azov is no longer a terrorist organization. It's a terrorist organization. It's a neo-Nazi organization that murders civilians. But here's NATO pushing them. And then Canada had all these Azov guys in Canada training with the Canadian Armed Forces. The British and the Americans were doing the same thing. And then a number of years ago, Canadian Parliament had an actual Ukraine. So just to rewind a little bit here, during World War II, the Nazis formed Ukrainian battalions to use them to slaughter the Poles and to slaughter the Russians during World War II. There was the SS Nachtigall, or the SS Nightingale, and then there were other groups as well. I'm trying to think of them, but there was the group of Stepan Bandera, which was called the what was it called? The UON, Ukrainian Organization of Nationalists, UON. And was it UON or UNO? I'll have to look it up. But it was the group of Stepan Bandera, and then there was SS Nachtigall. These were Ukrainian nationalist paramilitary groups that were backed and armed by the Third Reich, by Hitler's government. Well, the Ukrainian neo-Nazis today are the successors of that movement. There was an actual Ukrainian SS veteran from World War II. He was one of the OGs. He was still alive. Old man. Old SS Nazi. Canada brings this guy to the parliament to give a speech about how he heroically fought the Russians. Well, it turned out this guy was a member of the SS, Nazi SS. And the guy who organized the event got fired by the Trudeau government for that. Why are they bringing SS guys?
Oh shit.
Yeah. And Zelensky gave an award to another old Ukrainian guy who was a member of the SS. And it turned out this guy massacred an entire Polish village during World War II. And he was still alive. I think he's dead now, but this was a number of years ago. Zelensky gave this guy an award. So, and that's what we're supporting here. So, I don't give a damn what anyone tells me. NATO has a very long tradition of backing Nazis. So this whole flood of foreigners from Syria and other countries goes into Germany. What do you think's going to happen? You're going to have a nationalist uprising. That's exactly what happened.
Shit.
Yeah.
Damn.
And the big nationalist party in Germany, the AfD, is also the most militaristic, because the Americans want to use the Germans as a proxy against the Russians. They want to revive that old Nazi Wehrmacht spirit, use it against the Russians. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, this is what I see.
I mean, there's crazy stuff happening all the time, for sure.
Yeah.
Talk about what's your view on Nick Fuentes? Like, what are some of the agreements you have with him? Some disagreements? Like, do you have like a concrete opinion on him? Because he's getting bigger and bigger, so
Yeah,
I feel
he
like kind of the need to ask you about him.
He is getting bigger and bigger. He's not. I don't think he's as big as Tucker, but he is getting bigger. That is true. What I will say about Fuentes is, for one, yes, do I have agreements with him? Yes, absolutely. What the things that he says in regards to the pro-Israel lobby, having had undue influence, having had influence in things like the Iraq War, yes, I agree with him on that. My issue with Fuentes, I would say I have a minor issue with him, or I should say a secondary issue with him, but I have my primary issue with him. My secondary issue is that, for one thing, I do not trust Nick Fuentes. His followers, I've had experience with his followers. My experience with his followers is that they are very cultish. It's a cult. And virtually every time I say something critical about their cult, they pop up on my chat. What's your problem with Nick? What's your problem with Nick? They just get very upset, and it's very cult-like behavior. And I do not trust Nick Fuentes, and I think that the people who are following him, not all of them, but a lot of them, I think, are being very gullible, and they think that Fuentes is this great guy who's this great patriot. But I just want to tell them that they are going to be disappointed with Fuentes, because Fuentes is not who he tries to portray himself as. He tries to portray himself as this traditional Catholic. But yet, now, I've been noticing Nick Fuentes on and off since 2016. He kind of popped up in 2016 around there. And he's been, he wasn't super, super popular when he first popped up, but now he's more famous than he ever has been. He kind of disappeared for a while from my observation. He kind of vanished for whatever reason.
He got censored and stuff.
Oh, okay. There you go. So. There you go. So yeah, that explains it.
Debanked, censored, stuff like that.
Right. So now he's more popular than he ever has been. Here's why I don't trust him. He claims he's a traditional Catholic. He goes to church. Now, I used to go to the Catholic Church. I converted to Catholicism in 2013. So I'm very familiar with that world. And a number of years ago, and perhaps a lot of his followers never knew this. Maybe they've never seen this video. But there's a video that you can see on Twitter/X of Nick Fuentes hanging out with a cat boy. And it's this guy from, I want to say, Scandinavia, and he's got cat ears, and he's just obviously a flaming homosexual, this guy. And they're making weird, reprobate jokes. And you look at that, I look at that, and I say, there's no way this guy is a traditional Catholic. It's just impossible. This guy is not who he says he is. There's just no way. No true Catholic. Forget traditional, just Catholic. I don't like adding words because it means that there's different types of Catholic. There's only one type of Catholic. No true Catholic, no Christian, no conservative who believes in Christian ethics does that. Nobody. This guy is totally untrustworthy. He's just not trustworthy. And the problem is, we're getting all this momentum about the problems with Israel, which is great. People are finally opening their eyes to the Israeli Leviathan. But they're following this guy, and they think he's great. They're going to be disappointed. And I said earlier in this interview that the right wing has been fooled by many different people for years. And I say this because this is what I have been observing since I was in high school. I saw people getting fooled by, what's his name? Newt Gingrich. I saw people getting fooled by Glenn Beck. And every time, and I'm not blowing smoke up my own ass, it's just the truth. Every time I have warned these people, conservatives, about someone that they revered, I ended up being right. Without exception. I warned people about Glenn Beck. Now everybody hates him. I warned people about Mitt Romney. Everybody hates Mitt Romney. I warned people about Ben Shapiro. Everybody hates Ben Shapiro. I warned people about Milo Yiannopoulos. I warned everyone about him for years in 2016-17. I was telling people about Milo Yiannopoulos. I was right. I said, this guy is no damn good. Well, how do you know that? Milo's great. Oh, he's conservative. I said, it's very simple. I said, Milo is a member of Sodom. Sodom and Gomorrah. That's it. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know anything else. I don't trust him. And I was right. And then what happened with Milo? It ended up being revealed. It ended up being exposed to people that Milo was making arguments in favor for pederasty. If you don't know what pederasty is, it's basically when you have adult men pursuing teenage boys. He was making apologetics for that. And I was right. I said, I told you this guy was no damn good. I'll give you another example. Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager started Prager University.
Right.
And Prager University, at one point in time, for the longest time, was one of the biggest conservative American think tanks in the entire country. We're talking massive amounts of money and massive amounts of influence, hundreds of millions of dollars at least, and millions upon millions of followers. And I remember in 2017, I was watching Dave Rubin interview Dennis Prager, and you can still see the interview. It's still up on YouTube. They never took it down, even though I have reported them to YouTube. I reported this video to YouTube. They have never taken it down, which really goes to show that YouTube has a huge double standard when it comes to imposing its rules. But they're talking, and Dennis Prager says the most vile stuff I've ever heard about the Bible. The most vile, just the most vile things that you could say against or about the Bible. He said, the Bible never says this, but he says, the Bible says that men, and I hate to say this, but this is what he said. It's so disgusting. But he said that the Bible says, men, you can be just as attracted to 15-year-old boys as you would with a 15-year-old girl. And I remember hearing that in 2017, and I thought, wait, did I just hear that correctly? And I rewinded it and watched it again. I showed the video to my father, and I said, Dad, am I hearing stuff, or is this guy saying what I think he's saying?
Fuck?
Yeah, he's saying it. And I've been talking about this since 2017. And I did a video about it, and I said, here is Prager saying this vile stuff. Just vile. This is why I do not trust the judgment of the conservative movement in America. I don't trust their standards. I don't trust. How do I say this?
I feel like the same thing's happening with Trump too, though. I feel like people are losing trust in him too.
Well,
the people that voted for him.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but just to finish this thought, this is why I do not trust the discernment of the American conservatives. I did a video on Dennis Prager in 2017 when that video came out. And I said, guys, here is your Prager. Here is your infamous Prager. I got almost nothing but hatred from conservatives because I exposed Dennis Prager, because I put that video up and I said, look what Prager's doing. Prager is giving arguments for pederasty, just like Milo. And I remember, I kid you not, I got a phone call. I don't want to give names, but I got a phone call from someone who is in the conservative blogosphere. I got a phone call the next day, and he said, Ted, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? He said, you posted up this video showing Prager saying these things, and you accuse Prager of being vile and evil. And I said, well, what the fuck do you call that but vile and evil? I mean, of course. And he said, but you're taking his words out of context. And I said, excuse me, in what fucking context is saying what he said appropriate? And he said, no, you're wrong. And it's like, this guy couldn't disprove what I was saying, but he just kept telling me that I was wrong, because at that time, Prager was considered a great man. He was considered this great figurehead of conservatism. So we have to be for him. We have to support him. We can't go against him. And I was warning people for years about Prager. Well, guess what happened in 2000 and I want to say 2022 or 23, and recent years ago. What happened? Dennis Prager goes on the Pints with Aquinas podcast, which is a big Catholic podcast. And the Catholic interviewer tells Prager, do you condemn, and you can see this on YouTube, it's still up on YouTube. He says, do you condemn animated child pornography? Animated, which is still legal in Japan, last I checked. And Prager said, it's not evil. And he said, you're telling me that animated child pornography is not evil? And Prager said, no, it's not evil. And when Prager did that, guess what happened as a result? His organization lost money. And Dennis Prager lost popularity. He began to decline immensely, and people began to open their eyes. But why did people begin to open their eyes at that point, but not in 2017 when I was warning people about this when it came to Dennis Prager? And I believe it's because in 2017, the overwhelming majority of Americans were pro-Israel. And I believe that in 2017, Americans were still stuck in that paradigm of following the established pro-Israel American conservative media empire. But in 2022, I would say 2023, when Prager said those things in the midst of this in the throes of this massive shift that we're going through right now. And people went against Prager. But my point is that I was right about Prager. I told people, don't trust Prager. And almost everyone went against me. People I knew went against me. But I was right. I told people, don't trust Glenn Beck. And I got immense amounts of hatred for that. But I was right about Glenn Beck. I told people, don't trust Ben Shapiro. And I remember a woman that I've known since I was in elementary school, because her father is my dad's best friend. So I've known this girl since I was a little kid. She's older than me. She's, I don't know, like 8 years older than me, but I've known her since I was very, very young. Her and I got into this very intense argument back in 2020 or 2021 about Ben Shapiro. And I said, I do not trust Ben Shapiro. She said, why? And I said, well, because he's a member of the Chabad cult. And the Chabad cult is anti-Christian. I don't trust him. And she's like, oh, that's anti-Semitic and all this bullshit. And it's like, but now you see people waking up to Ben Shapiro. I never liked Mark Levine. And Mark Levine used to be on top of the earth. Now everybody hates Mark Levine. I never liked Jordan Peterson. I wrote an article against Jordan Peterson back in 2019. You can read it, warning people about the Jordan Peterson cult, why you cannot trust Jordan Peterson. Because Jordan Peterson... What
about Dave Smith?
Well, I'll get to him. That's a good question. But my point is that I've warned these people, and they just don't see it initially, but eventually they do. So I'm warning people about Fuentes. I do not trust this guy. He's no damn good. And right now, a lot of people love him, but I'm afraid that people are going to be disappointed. In regards to Dave Smith, I agree with most of what Dave Smith says. I was rooting for him when he debated Coleman Hughes. I was rooting for him when he debated Josh Hammer. Then he brings in Fuentes. And the revealing thing about him bringing Fuentes is that the video in which Smith is talking with Fuentes is Smith's most watched video in his entire channel. Now, does Smith agree with everything that Fuentes says? Probably not, because Smith is Jewish. I don't think he agrees with Fuentes's Hitler fanboydom, because Fuentes is a Hitler fanboy. But I think Smith invited Fuentes on because Fuentes is a pretty big figurehead now. And what that tells me, and I don't agree with what he did. I don't. I think it was wrong to do what Dave Smith did.
Oh, really?
I think it's wrong because he didn't really push back on much of anything. I mean, he did push back a little bit here and there, but it wasn't like this full-blown, hey, what's this Hitler stuff about? And see, that's the issue. And Tucker Carlson did a similar thing where he brings Nick Fuentes on. And initially, Tucker Carlson was saying, hey, listen, I don't trust Fuentes. I think Fuentes is a plant. He was saying, I think Fuentes is just there to make our movement look bad, et cetera, et cetera. And I wouldn't doubt that. But all of a sudden, Tucker Carlson invites Fuentes on. Why does he invite Fuentes on? Well, because Fuentes is big. He attracts a big audience. And so what that tells me is that we are going through this major shift for the worst. Now, I want to be positive here. I don't want to be like, oh, everything's bad and everything like that. I believe that there is going to be a divide. So right now, everyone is becoming critical of Israel. Everyone is. People are jumping off the pro-Israel boat. People are abandoning Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson. What the hell happened to that guy? He's gone. All that stuff is old news. So now people are joining the camp of, hey, America first, not Israel first. And they're asking the question, are you America first or are you Israel first? And I believe that this movement is going to divide between the people who, this is going to sound kind of far-fetched, but hey, truth is stranger than fiction. But I think there's going to be a split between the people who love Hitler and they love Nazism and the people who say, no, Jesus first. Because they are people like myself who are critical of Israel for good reasons. They are people like myself who say, I am critical of Israel because Israel is doing evil. And I am not a fan of Adolf Hitler. And this is the problem, is people start becoming critical of Israel, and then they start saying, well, maybe Hitler was right. And they start getting into that mindset. They start getting into that movement. And a lot of people I think, are subscribing to that paradigm. A lot of people are subscribing to that way of thinking. And that's my biggest fear about this. My biggest fear about the rise of this criticism of Israel is that people are going to start saying, Hitler was great. And if you don't like Hitler, if you don't like Nazism, then we hate you. You're an enemy. You are an enemy.
It might ruin the movement to some degree,
Oh, yeah.
possibly.
I think so. And so I think there's going to be a divide between people who say Hitler is great, white supremacy, and people who say, no, Jesus first. Not Israel first, not race first, but Jesus first, Christ first. And I think that's the big divide that we're heading towards. I think there's going to be a fracture in the movement because Nick Fuentes, he's trying to get people to hate Candace Owens. And I fear that in the future, in the foreseeable future even, people are going to be saying, we agree with what Candace is saying, but we don't like her because she's black. That is a fear that I have, that it's that right now we're starting with Tucker, Candace Owens, Dave Smith, James Mearsheimer, Scott Horton. But then in the future, this thing can escalate to the point where a lot of the people who are in this movement are going to start saying, Tucker, he's a sellout. He didn't want to Sieg Heil. Scott Horton, he's a sellout. He didn't want to Sieg Heil. He didn't want to revere Hitler. He didn't want to say nice things about the Nazis. Because I don't know Scott Horton personally, but I'm reading his book right now, Provoked. That's the name of the book. It's called Provoked, which is a great book. And he warns about the Nazis. He talks about how the CIA for years has been backing the Nazis in Ukraine. He doesn't like Nazism. He's critical of Israel, but he doesn't like Nazis. And so people like Scott Horton might be seen as sellouts and might be seen as Zionist shills, or they might be seen as agents of Israel or whatever. They might look at Dave Smith and say, Dave, we agree with some of the things that he's saying, but he's a Jew. How can we trust him? And so I fear that that's the path that we're heading towards. Where the movement that we see right now, yeah, where the movement that we see right now is going to shift against the figureheads that we have right now. Like I said, Horton, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, etc. These are our figureheads right now, but the movement, or much of the people in this movement, might turn against them because they want something more extreme. And that could happen. And that's the danger that I see. And that's the danger that I see with the rise of people like Fuentes. But I can tell you right now, and I can assure you, that Fuentes is not who people think he is. This guy, anyone who does what he does, is not a Christian. I mean, and I can show you a video of Nick Fuentes making a joke about raping men. Man, I can show you the video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's on X. Yeah, he's making
I don't
a joke
know him too much.
He's making a joke about it. Anyone who makes these types of jokes is not a Christian. And you don't have to be a Christian to know that there's something very wrong with that. Anyone who makes these jokes is not a decent human being. So I'm just not buying this whole thing. I'm just not. But
Or it could be like the younger the younger angst people will follow him, but then when they get older, mature, maybe
that
like
might happen.
kind of gravitate more towards Tucker, or something like. I feel like I've met a few people that like Fuentes, but they also watch Candace and they watch Tucker
Right.
still. Like they
Right,
like all of
right.
them, and they know they have their disagreements. Like when you like a band that's having like the band hates each other now. They're not a band, you know what I mean? But they still like all the artists,
Right.
So it could be something like that happens too.
Right. That could
Who
happen.
knows though? And Fuentes is super young, and he's probably said some stupid shit. I mean, maybe he'll mature. Maybe people still have disagreements with him, but who
I don't
knows?
know.
We have no idea.
I just foresee, and this I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but I just foresee, and this is going to sound kind of cringe, but I foresee Nazism making a comeback in the Western world, in Europe especially, and I think that you see. And I've talked about this for years, even before 2023. I was warning people about this stuff. If you look at some of the most murderous regimes in history, you look at Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan murdered the Mongolian Empire, murdered more people than the communists did. They murdered more people than the Nazis did. They murdered, what was it, like 12% of the world's population or something was wiped out by the Mongolian Empire. And it was pretty horrendous. But if you pick up a modern day book in a bookstore today and you read about the Mongolian Empire, you don't read about how the Mongolian Empire was evil. You just don't. Modern day historians don't make moral judgments against the Mongolian Empire. They don't make modern day judgments against the Hunnic kingdom either. Attila the Hun, who was also very murderous. In fact, I remember back in 2000 and I want to say 18 or 19, I read a book by an author named Eugene Rogan. It was called, I think it was called The Fall of the Ottoman Empire. I think it was called The Fall of the Ottoman Empire. If you look up Eugene Rogan, Ottoman Empire, you'll see the book. And it was on exactly what the title said, The Fall of the Ottoman Empire, how the Ottoman Empire fell, and during the First World War. And during the First World War, the Ottoman Empire orchestrated a genocide of about 1 million Armenians, and that was in the late 1910s, 1917, 18. And Eugene Rogan is one of the most formidable historians on the end of the Ottoman Empire. And he has a number of chapters in this book on the Armenian genocide. But you know what's crazy? Is he doesn't call it a genocide. I'm pretty certain he doesn't call it a genocide. And he doesn't express any moral judgment against the Ottoman Empire. Doesn't call them evil. Doesn't call the Young Turks who orchestrated the genocide evil. Nothing. He just gives you some basic facts on what happened. And it's very analytical. And I think that the same type of perspective is going to become mainstream when it comes to the Holocaust. I think we are just going to see the German Empire or the Nazi Third Reich as just one of the empires of history. We will mention their atrocities in passing. We will describe Adolf Hitler as a great strategist and as a very remarkable leader. And perhaps one day we'll see Adolf Hitler's face on a European bill, on European currency. I wouldn't be surprised, because this is the inevitable end of historical narratives. If you read, for example, what people were writing about the Huns, the Hunnic kingdom or empire. They talked about how the Huns were evil, how they were demonic, how they were drinking blood, they were cannibals, they would commit these horrific massacres. But nowadays, you pick up a book on the Huns. I'm talking modern day books that are written in our time. And these books will say things like, oh, the Huns weren't really that bad. Oh, the Huns were very excellent in military strategy. Oh, the Huns were very organized. Oh, well, the Huns, uh, the things that people wrote about them, the atrocities that people accused them of doing were obviously exaggerated, etc., etc. I think the same thing is going to happen to the Nazis. I think we're going to start seeing more and more historians treating the Nazis like we do the Mongols or the Ottomans or the Huns. And Hitler is no longer going to be seen as the epitome of evil. And when that happens, then it would become, or it will be acceptable to praise him as a great leader. And I'm not saying this is right. This is one of my nightmares. This is one of my nightmare scenarios.
Possibility or something.
Yeah, but I totally see this happening. And I fear that when you deny the crimes of the past and you praise the perpetrators, I think it makes it much easier to repeat those very crimes. That's what I will say.
Okay. Is there a particular person that you would want to run in 2028?
No.
No.
I mean, I would like to see, if I had to if I had to give you an answer on that, I would like to see someone who truly, truly wants peace with Russia and China and doesn't push for war. Like, for example, a Scott Horton or a John Mearsheimer. These guys who have written books on why we need peace with Russia, why it would be better if we had peace with China, as opposed to just having unending aggression with these countries. Because NATO's aggressive policy against Russia and China has only gotten these countries to become more militaristic, more militarily powerful, and it's made them more and more hostile towards the United States. And thus, it has made the prospect of war, of nuclear war, much higher. And so we live in a much more dangerous world because of that. So if I had a dream government for the United States,
right,
it would be a government that is against militarism and wants cooperation with Russia and China. But that's never going to happen. I mean, maybe it will, who knows? But that's not going to happen in the foreseeable future, I'm afraid, because we have a very powerful military industrial complex that wants to make money from war. And so, but it's because of our aggression towards Russia that 1 million people have been killed in this war in Ukraine. And people see that and they say, man, we're tired of NATO. We're tired of this hostility towards Russia. And then you see that interview between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, and Tucker Carlson is saying, hey, 1 million people dead in Ukraine. Do you feel bad about supporting the war in Ukraine? And Ted Cruz says, no, I don't, because I think the person to blame is Biden. It's like, well, fuck you. You don't feel bad? 1 million people dead? It's terrible. And this war in Ukraine is just going on and on and on and on. And we could put a stop to it if we just said, okay. Because Russia was right when, for many decades, they were telling the Americans, stop meddling in Ukraine. Ukraine is our backyard. And they never listened. They kept meddling with Ukraine. They kept training the Ukrainian military. They kept giving the Ukrainians weapons. And they were backing Ukrainian Nazis for many years. And they eventually did a coup in 2014, the Euromaidan coup, in which the Americans backed neo-Nazis to overthrow the Yanukovych government. What was his name? I forgot his first name, but it was the Yanukovych government. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, really. And then Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. Well, Trump said, hey, Ukraine, you're going to have to make concessions. You're going to have to concede territory because you're losing the war. And so you should give up Donbass, which is the eastern part of Ukraine that Russia really wants to control. Trump told Zelensky, you should give up Donbass. And Russia's saying, yeah, we're all for that. Give us the Donbass. We're fine. But here's the problem is Europe told Donald Trump, the EU, really the Germans, the British, the French, they told Donald Trump, well, we don't want Ukraine to concede any territory unless we are allowed to deploy troops to the rest of Ukraine that is not controlled by the Russians. And Donald Trump entertained that idea, but the Russians made it very clear to Trump, if you put any European troops in Ukraine, then we would consider that an act of war, because the entire purpose of this war was to prevent the EU, prevent NATO from being in Ukraine. Right. So that would be counterproductive for us. So if they could just say, okay, you know what, Russia, it's like this. If Russia was meddling in Canada and training the Canadians and backing anti-American Canadian opposition groups and just acting nonchalantly, willy-nilly in Canada all the time, just operating in Canada all the time, America wouldn't like that. America would be telling Russia, hey, Russia, you got to fuck off. And so America needs to say, and I know this is a no-brainer, right? This is obvious to everyone. But America should just say, all right, Russia, that's your backyard. We back off. The world's a pretty big place. America doesn't need to control the whole earth. We have Canada. We got South America. We got Central America. We got Western Europe. America doesn't need to control the earth. That's Russia's backyard.
That's what people voted for, right?
Yes.
People voted for to leave. Like they wanted Israel to stop. They wanted the whole Ukraine thing to stop. Like we're just kind of done with it.
Absolutely. And people are just done with it. They're tired of hearing about how, well, another set of billions of dollars have gone to Ukraine. And they're just tired of it.
Okay, well, I'm gonna
anyway, yeah.
But I guess I'll ask you just one more question. Is there anything creative that you haven't done that you want to do? Like anything, whether it's like on the street stuff, maybe even running for like politics, or has there something that you always wanted to do but you just haven't got around to doing it? Or
I have no interest in running for politics. I want to create kind of like a video montage of what's been happening in Gaza, and I started doing that months ago, and I stopped, but I need to finish it. But
okay,
as far as a big change, I don't know. One day I want to just stream on Twitch, but I've heard Twitch has huge amounts of censorship, so I'm not sure if that's a good idea.
I mean, you could totally try it out. I stream on Twitch. I mean, I'm not streaming right now. I'm just doing like a video to upload later.
Mm-hmm.
But Twitch is all right. I've been doing Twitch and YouTube. Mm-hmm. I know that you said you got censored or something, or something happened. And you started going to Rumble.
Yeah, I have a Rumble account. I upload my videos on Rumble also.
Have you been liking Rumble?
Rumble's okay. It's just it doesn't. There's a large audience in Rumble. I just haven't been favored by the algorithm yet. I have to keep trying until the algorithm picks me up. As far as uploading videos on Rumble, it's more of a pain in the ass than YouTube. YouTube, the way that their layout is set up, it's very easy to upload videos on YouTube, and it's very convenient because you just drag and drop the file, tell the thing to upload, and then you can just set it up on private and you can just get off the page. Whereas with Rumble, you upload a video and it just takes a lot longer to upload a video. Yeah, it just takes, but it's not a big deal. I just drag and drop it on Rumble and I leave the room, come back hours later.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It just takes a longer time, but it's not really a big deal. But Rumble has a large audience. I mean, I think it's the second biggest. I think it's the biggest competition for YouTube.
At least
But
with politics.
yeah, yeah. But I just have not been favored by the algorithm yet. Once you get favored by the algorithm, then it's smooth sailing. But
Oh,
it hasn't
cool.
happened
Well,
yet.
I enjoyed this conversation very much, my friend.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you for doing this very much. And yeah, appreciate it very much.
All right.
Hope you have a good day, my friend.
All right, you too, sir. I enjoyed it. And if you want to do it again, just let me know.
Oh, anytime, my friend.
All right, anytime.
Bye.
Well, that was fun. Theo, you were going to circle back to discuss Trump. Was I? I don't remember. Let me see here. So many people watching. What was I going to say about Donald Trump? I don't remember. Speaking of Western civilization, isn't Latin America part of it as well? Yep. Theo, okay, the way things are going, America won't be controlling those places. Let's talk about what Ukrainian Nazis and what they do to the Russian minority in Donbass. Yep. Based take on Ukraine, Russia. Nobody talks about 2014 Donbass situation. Yeah, appreciate that, sir. Thank you. Treason doth never prosper, for if it prosper, none dare call it treason. True. Adolf will have to be on digital currency. Yeah, I can see that. Starting censor at 50 minutes, language reduced. Fluent and inflammatory can get the conversation started. The elephant in the room bursts to be heard. I feel like Cody should have paid for this lecture. I can't find any stream on his going on right now. I'm not sure what is to gain. Cody is pre-recording the interview, so it'll be up on his page. But I have decided to live stream it because why not? It's good content for the channel. The Groypers will destroy each other. True. Yep. Fill the void or the void fills you. You just said it's a joke. Is it true? I've worked with a guy like Ted where he could talk to someone when he was training them and he knew whether they were going to be any good or not at work. And he was always right. Good eye. Christ is king. Absolutely. I think we need to tread carefully. Yep. Absolutely, Mr. Trevor Green. Finish on Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was backing eugenics. And he was saying very weird things like, oh, you could take someone and strap them on a chair and then you could hit a little switch to electrocute them, and then every time you electrocuted them you would see you would show them a little light, and then they would associate the light with electrical pain, and then once you turned the electricity off and stopped electrocuting them, you could still flash the light on, and then you would still make them like terrified or whatever. And it's just very weird stuff. The guy's a sick fuck. Jordan Peterson is a very sick person. I think Michael has a new website called Souls and Liberty or something. NATO promised to never expand further. Yep, and they lied. That's all they did was lie. Ted also had a hand in bringing down Church Militant. Oh, I forgot to mention that. That's very true. That is very true. I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Green. Yep. Yeah, Michael Voris brought Milo on to work at his studio, and I said, "Bop, bullshit." And I called up Michael Voris, and I confronted him. The phone conversation is on YouTube. Look up Theodore Schubot, Michael Voris. You'll get it. And I was absolutely right about Voris. Absolutely right about Voris. Do I know any German podcasts? Nope. I barely know any American ones. Nick defended Israel after the Kirk assassination. That's what I remember that, yeah. Don't trust him? Nope, I don't trust him at all. Yeah, I don't think it was the speaker of the parliament's fault entirely. I think they just found a fall guy. Oh, Yanis Varoufakis? Yeah, I know about that group in Greece. Hello, Carols. Winston Churchill. That was Patton. Winston Churchill, we fought the wrong. Yeah, that was Patton. America created Frankenstein. Yep. I'll be streaming tomorrow with my dad. We'll be doing an interview at 12 noon Eastern time. I'll announce it on this page probably later on today. Not probably, I will. So you guys can just click on it. But I'll be streaming with my dad tomorrow because we'll be doing an interview together. So that'll be 12 noon tomorrow. I'm not sure if I'll be streaming on Friday, though. Do you really need the think tank to tell you that? I don't, but I'm just using it as a reference. The woke marketing was used to distract from the non-recession recession. Really? Is that really true? Can you give me some evidence for that? Woke ideology, Venezuelan migrant crisis, COVID pandemic, all pretty much within order, race riots, and was definitely engineered, in my opinion, by China. Do you have evidence that China backed wokeism? They want a country of Spartans? Yeah, I think so. Hello, Cody. Gonna start editing the video. I'll message you the video when I'm done. Appreciate that, sir. Thank you. It was a lot of fun talking with you. China doesn't need to do anything. America is destroying itself. Yeah, I don't see any reason why China would back wokeism. But if you have evidence, please share it with me. America was backing wokeism. Yeah, appreciate that, Cody. Glad you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. What year do you predict Israel will be gone? If I had to guess, I would say by like the 2030s or 40s. I would love if you made a stream talking about the Nazis in Slovenia. I'll look into it. I'll look into it. I did a video about Nazis in the Baltics not too long ago. Let me see something here. I bet you next week you'll hit 20,000 subs. I hope so. It'll be nice. I'm at 19.5 plus right now. When? I can't tell you, dude. I have a lot of stuff on my schedule. I got so many videos to edit. I got a lot of videos to edit. And then I have an interview tomorrow. And what else? I got an article I'm working on. I got books to read. Man, like I am never not busy. No, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I'm never not busy. It's just impossible for me to have nothing to do. I always have something to do. I always have a book to read. I got a room to clean. I got cats to take care of. I got a garden to raise. Chickens to take care of. Bread to bake. Just a bunch of shit to do, man. When the 3v3 debate with Sandra, dude, nothing's been talked about. Nothing. Those guys have never gone. They've never contacted us. Michael Brown never contacted us. None of those people contacted us. Nazis in the Balkans. I mean, the one you did. I talked about Nazis in the Baltic, but not in the. I talked about Croatians. All right, guys. I think I'm done. I've been here for almost 3 hours. It was a good debate. It was not a debate. It was a good interview. We had a lot of fun. And we had a lot of fun, and it was great. And I'll be doing an interview tomorrow with a Palestinian podcaster. And he invited us on. So my dad and I will be here tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central time. I'll put the video up. I'll do the video announcement on my page for you guys to click on it when it begins. And we'll be talking for probably over an hour or so, maybe less. I don't know. So we'll have fun with that. Thank you as always, Ted. Big hugs. Appreciate that, sir. All right, guys. I'll talk to you guys later. It was a lot of fun. And you guys enjoy the rest of your night or your day. When am I doing the next stream with Sam? I'm going to have to get back with Sam. He told me to contact him anytime after the 15th. So I will contact him as soon as I can and say, hey, do you want to do another interview? Give me a good time that works with you. And that's it. So I'll see you guys soon. I did another video. I have to edit it. It's a hour-long video. Hopefully it'll be good. I think it will be. And I have a lot of stuff to do. So I'll be seeing you guys later. Be well. Enjoy your evening or your morning, wherever you are. And have a great rest of your week. I'll see you guys tomorrow on the live stream we'll be doing. My dad and I will be here, God willing. And you guys have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. All right, guys? It was a lot of fun. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.